She giggled and squatted down, unfolding the bag in front of her, and said that the silver moon guild would suspect her if she sold them right away, so she'd better hide them for now. Finally, she noticed a business card lying on the pavement and picked it up to examine it more closely. She recalled Sun Wu's words about what he thought her skill is really amazing. After thinking about it, an N quietly said that he didn't know anything. She got to her feet, slung the sack over her shoulder, and walked on, exclaiming that Hugh is a fool. Does he think she will come to him if he praises her? Time passed. Odin's Tower is an unexplored class dungeon. The only thing that is known is that the strongest hunter of the first generation, BKH, Wen, found it and tried to conquer it. But communication with him was lost, and he still hasn't returned. After that, countless hunters tried to conquer the tower, but all failed, unable to even descend to the level below. Just one man, George Lucas, called the Jumper. Wani said that was where their first team was trapped, including his sister, the team leader. Junmo exclaimed in surprise. Odin's Tower. Sun Wu asked, what exactly is the meaning of being trapped? Odin replied that Odin's Tower has a special structure. It has an input, but no output. Sun Wu suddenly felt uneasy, and Wanti said that the only thing that connected them to the outside world was their mana. The only way to contact them is by using the telepathy skill. Because of this, there are a limited number of ways to get out. He must either pass the dungeon or escape with teleportation skill. That's why his cloning skill is so important. After all, other hunters won't be able to escape if something happens in the dungeon. General asked, is that why he nay? Wanti looked down and said that they had given them an escape route. He paused and Sangwoo asked, why haven't they escaped yet? Wanti closed his eyes as he considered his next words. After that, he said with a grim face that he would tell him everything about what happened in the tower and what went wrong. It all started 5 years after the massive disaster in 2005. His sister revealed her ability during dark times, not long after the end of the disaster. One day, young Park Wanti swung his sword, sliced a huge rat in half, and after the monster's body fell to the ground, he sheathed his sword inside. Then he was 16 years old. Suddenly, his sister poked him in the back, causing him to jump in surprise and turn around. A 9-year-old girl, his sister Park Yuna, handed him a package of food and asked if he wanted to eat. He called out to her worriedly and bent down, telling her that he had told her not to go outside. Is she hurt? Suddenly, he noticed a red clot in the side, and she replied that she was not injured. Back then, she developed a skill similar to interdimensional storage. Wanti looked at the red blob suspiciously and asked how she did it. She replied that it just appeared. She can put a lot of things there. He laughed and told him to hurry up and eat. She knows he's hungry. He patted her on the head and said he was fine. Let her eat instead. She has a pretty good skill. He got down on one knee so Yuna could climb on his back and suggested that she go home to sleep. She was probably tired. She confirmed his words and said that she was so sleepy. She climbed behind him and they walked together to safety. She said, when will my uncle be back? He replied that in about 20. Thanks to Yun's skill, they were able to overcome many dangerous situations in their youth. Both objects and people could fit in that space. He recalled when they were fishing and said that he thought this skill was perfect for clearing dungeons. They were growing up now, and it wasn't a child's voice that called out to him. When the guild was already established, one day he thought about something, and his sister slapped her on the back of the head, loudly calling his name. She asked why he was sad. At that time, his sister was already the head of the first team of the Canis Guild. Wanti turned his gaze to his sister, and the guild members were worried and said that the guild leader had been hit on the back of the head. Wanti said that, if it was about Odin's Tower, he wasn't sure if it was the right decision. He thinks they should at least get a teleportation skill holder. Yuna sighed in exasperation and said that he was talking about it again. Why don't they just purchase a teleportation scroll? There aren't even 100 teleportation skill holders in the entire world. They didn't get any. How can you guarantee that there will be one soon? She moved closer to his face and, now the first team is in the best shape, and they have its skill. This is the only chance. Wani wanted to protest, but his sister's expression suddenly became sad, and she asked, or does he not trust her? Even before the first team went to the dungeon, he wasn't sure if they would be able to pass Odin's Tower. The guild deputy walked up to the guild head and asked with a smile, which one of them was the guild head. She left and another guild member told him not to worry. He would protect the team leader. Yuna said irritably that he shouldn't even dream about it. Another team member said that if he said that again, he would definitely get a kick in the ribs from her. Wanty was still too concerned about this tower and kept silent. And his sister said Thatch promised that they would go back if it became dangerous. She knows how painful it can be when a family member doesn't return. Wanty was suddenly surprised by her words. He shouldn't have agreed then. Yuna snapped her fingers and said with a smile that not only did they have the teleportation scroll at their disposal, but they also had a huge supply of food and medicine. Back then, he shouldn't have been relieved that they had emergency funds. His sister waved goodbye to him, and then the whole team went to the tower. He should have stopped them then. After they left, Wanty moved to the office and became very nervous, saying that they were gone. The deputy who was sitting in the chair opposite asked, did he think they wouldn't leave? After all these years of preparation, he's too protective of the team leader. Who else would believe in them if not the guild master? Wanty thought for a few seconds, then replied that she was right. Since they're gone, he thinks he should believe in them. There was a knock on his office door, and a bearded man came in, saying that he would have to leave soon. The deputy asked if he had an appointment. Wanty confirmed her words and said that this time it was his turn to be the host of the Wake Up program. After hearing his story, Sangwoo said that he was there that time. Wanty smiled awkwardly and asked, really, what a coincidence. Sunwoo waved his hand and said that he was there that time. He wouldn't recognize it even if he saw it. Junmo asked, how did he try to contact the first team? Wanty looked down and replied that they agreed to contact each other every week using telepathy scrolls. But since this is not possible outside the portal, the communication team needed to beat the entrance of the tower. There were no problems with the first report, just like with the second and third. Everything was going well, so he started to calm down. But a month later, there were problems. That day, he came to a tent located at the entrance of Odin's tower, which stood in the midst of rocks and snow. Someone said that a scheduled report should arrive soon. Wanty asked, today they should have reached 40 kilometers on the first floor, right? His second-in-command confirmed his words and told the guild member who was sitting at the computer to prepare a telepathy scroll. He agreed, and then took out a scroll and said that he would use it now. As soon as he tore open the scroll, a powerful burst of energy caused snow to swirl around Thetant. The guy listened, and a few seconds later exclaimed that they had received a report. Wanty started to worry and wanted to ask something, but his second-in-command told him to be quiet. The guy listened and said that they had covered 700 meters from Thelist Announce Point. He was silent for a few seconds, then said that there was an ambush of unknown monsters. Most of the team fights with the monster. They were wounded. Suddenly, several voices started coming into his head at once, and he couldn't make out what they were saying. At the rush of voices, he clutched his head and screamed loudly in pain, saying that his head was going to explode. The deputy was very worried and asked what was going on with the communications team. Wanty put his hands on the boy's shoulders and said that they must have torn up several scrolls at the same time. Let him control the flow of mana. Suddenly, off to the side, he saw a black and red bundle of energy that was rapidly growing in size. He turned around, as if expecting the worst-case scenario. A portal appeared in front of them, gusts of wind swept through the tent, and Wanty thought, did they even use the teleportation scroll? While a powerful gust of wind hit him in the face, he tried to see who came out of the portal and shouted, what happened to the team? The first team member's weakened arm appeared from the portal, and then the rest of the body appeared. A bespectacled boy came out of the portal, bleeding profusely and holding his stomach wound with his hand. The weak-willed decision to escape in spite of the others, coupled with irresponsibility under the guise of trust, led to the result that appeared before his eyes. Wanty held Sung-Ti up to keep him from falling and called out to him worriedly. Then, he turned to the rest of the guild members and asked them to quickly bring the medical team here. All of a sudden, the portal that had once been large suddenly shrank to a small spark, and Wanty noticed it. He was very nervous about closing the portal and realizing that no one else would come out. At the same time, his second-in-command slammed her palms down on the floor, causing a surge of energy to form a protective barrier around the tent. After that, she immediately went to the guy who was on telepathic communication and said that let him wake up. Now everything is fine. Is the telepathic link intact? The guy quickly regained consciousness and, pressing the earpiece to his ear, replied that everything was fine. She said that he should tell them this. They would send a rescue team to pick them up, so they should only report the situation at 2 in the afternoon. and never get out of subspace. The guy said he understood. Wanti, meanwhile, was holding the wound on Suntight's stomach, and Sunti, panting, apologized to him and said that they failed. The monsters tore up all the scrolls. They had never seen such a monster in the reports. One of the medics started treatment and green crosses began to radiate from his body. Suddenly, Sung-ti coughed up blood, and the medic said that he was bleeding badly and needed to be taken to the hospital immediately. Sung-ti coughed again before being carried out of the tent on a stretcher. Won-ti, who was still in shock, was sitting on the spot near the pool of blood that Sun-ti had left behind, thinking about something. Suddenly, the guy said that they wanted to give him something. The telepathic link is still active, so he'll just repeat what he was told. After that, he started repeating Yun's words. The battle is over. She thinks they failed the mission. She thought they could handle it. Hearing these words, Wanti realized who it was and clenched his hands into fists, and the guy continued to transmit the words. They can wait, so let them take their time. She would come back alive, no matter what the cost. After finishing the story, Wanti said that those were her last words. After that, they tried to hire many hunters, but no one agreed. One of these hunters asked, Odin's Tower, this is crazy. Another hunter asked if it was possible to go there relying on teleportation scrolls, then how would they explain the failure of the team that was locked up there? Another hunter, from whom he asked for help, replied that her pet could not go further than 5 kilometers away from her. And she herself, of course, did not want to go there. Another hunter, from whom he asked for help, replied that her pet could not go further than 5 kilometers away from her, and she herself, of course, did not want to go there. Wanti told Sunwoo that there was a disaster after that, and he met him. Sangwoo said that was why he wanted it to meet certain characteristics, because he needs to be able to at least get tough place where the team is stuck. Wanti confirmed his words and said that he did everything in his power. Now it's time to deploy the rescue mission. Their guild, Canis, will escort him to the entrance of Odin's Tower. They're leaving tomorrow, so they'll meet up on the spot. Time passed, and evening came. In a place called Paradise, the sound of blows could be heard in one of the rooms. The head of the guild beat up the men who had previously stood at the entrance to the station and said that they were jerks. Did he tell them to go inside and hunt? Or was he asking for something impossible? He even gave them D-class assholes and asked them to guard the entrance, but everything was stolen. Do they want him to believe that? The head of the Silver Moon Guild is named Young Jukul, and he's very angry right now. He sat down on the couch and said that he would listen to what kind of trash robbed them. One of the guild members put his hands behind his back and excitedly said that most of them were wearing masks. And one of them wasn't wearing a mask. But he wasn't listed as a D-class or higher hunter. The guild leader said that it turns out that they were beaten by an E-class hunter. He kicked the kid who said that with all his strength and asked, I think they're the only ones who do crystal refining. If they don't reach the required amount to transfer Tuth Hisong Guild, do they think they will be kindly waited for? He continued to beat up the poor guy who was already lying on the floor, and when blood spurted out, he exclaimed again, do they think they can wait? He finally stopped beating the guy, and he put his hands to his head and howled in pain, bleeding profusely. The guild leader looked up at the other subordinates and said that it would be over if they found another supplier. He won't say anything more. Let them find that guy and bring him to him. He gave the order, and his subordinates said they understood. After that, they left the room, and one of them helped the beaten guy to stand on his feet. The guild leader, meanwhile, thought that he was sure they would get beaten up again, since it had already happened once. He rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly inside, saying that they were useless assholes. Where would he get the crystals? He turned to Cheng Jiyang, who was sitting nearby, and said that he thought he should go. Cheng Jiyang placed his drink glass on the table with a ringing sound and happily replied that he understood. He laughed and said he thought they could find out who it was if they beat up a few people. He doesn't understand why they waste their time doing other things. Kong Changxiang is the deputy head of the Silver Moon Guild. The next day arrived. It was early in the morning, and Sangwoo and the agent were at the JM agency together. They were both riding in the elevator, and Suna Wu asked if there was anything strange about this job. He doesn't think he's lying, but he suspects that he clearly didn't mention something important. Junmo asked what he meant by that. Sunwoo replied that he was talking about the reason why they were originally trying to clear out Odin's Tower. He doesn't know anything about the hunter industry, but he's heard a lot about the tower. And it was already conquered back in 2012, when the jumper first came out of the tower and called a press conference. He was bombarded with questions from all sides. How does it feel to successfully complete the tower walkthrough? Was there a reward for clearing Odin's tower? Then he looked up at the reporters and said that Odin's tower was empty. All that's left are the monsters. There's no treasure and no items. They are not allowed to enter Odin's tower tunnels. Sunwoo said that after that, the hunters stopped trying to conquer the tower and lost all interest in it. So it became an abandoned dungeon. But he didn't explain why his best team decided to conquer Odin's tower. Junmo thought about it and replied that it was true. Does Huantim to look into this matter? Sunwoo replied that there was no need. Not that it matters. His job is to save the team, not to go through the dungeon. So he'll focus on that. They finally arrived at the right floor and the elevator doors opened. They got out of the elevator and Junmo said that they would come back to this matter later. But he stopped in mid-sentence when he saw the girl sitting on the floor by the door, sleeping. It was Anon, who had come to the address on the card after all. Junmo shifted his gaze to Sangwoo and asked, "Who is it?" He replied that he had met her in the hunting area and said that she could come here if she didn't find another job. Although he didn't expect her to be sitting at the entrance like this, Junmo got closer to her and asked for her forgiveness, asking if she was okay. She woke up and slowly opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was Junmo's creepy face. He said that his name is Kong Junmo and that he's from JM Agency. From such a sight before her eyes, the girl was very frightened and screamed. Shrinking back, there was silence in the hallway for a few seconds, and then she let out a sigh when she saw who was standing in front of her. A rumble from her stomach broke the silence, and the men were surprised. One of them asked why they couldn't have a bite to eat first. They go to a restaurant across the street. A few minutes later, they were in a restaurant and several dishes were brought to them. Young started eating her food quickly, and Sangwoo asked in surprise, was she that hungry? Junmo laughed and asked her not to rush like this. Young looked up at Sangwoo and said something unintelligible because of the food in her mouth. Sangwoo said to let her finish her meal first. He handed her her phone and told her that he had written down his number there. Judging from the fact that she came, he can count on her being here to work for the JM Agency, right? The girl suddenly froze on the spot, and then swallowed the food and replied that it was so. Junmo asked, in that case, can he find out what skill she has? She scratched her cheek in embarrassment and said that she could evaluate items and create potions. Sangwoo added that it's usually followed by death. Anen jumped up indignantly from her chair and called out to him. Then she grabbed his hair and shouted that she also had potions that didn't kill. Sangwoo said that he understood. Let her let him go already. After her grip, his bang stood on end, and he said that in return, these potions give great effects. He would like to use these skills. June stood on end, and he said that in return, these potions give great effects. Junmo approached his face and whispered, is he going to use them on clones? Sangwoo also confirmed his words in a whisper, and then said that if he could get everything he needed to Junmo took out a notebook and pen and replied with a smile that he understood. Since he said so, they will do everything. Sangwoo got up from his chair and said that it was fine. Let them continue eating, but it was already time for him to go. Junmo agreed and said that it was already time. Sangwoo started to leave, but Anen stopped him by asking, where is he going? He replied that he was going to the dungeon. She asked, is he hunting again? He replied that this was not the case. This time his goal was not hunting. Anen thought for a while and reached into her pocket, and then she abruptly threw two potion bottles and told him to let him have it. She created these potions, one for strength and one for mana. This is in gratitude for the food. Sangwoo looked at the bottles, each of which had a label attached to it, and said that they were easy to recognize. Side effects. Anon replied that the power potion dissolves the muscles and the mana potion explodes the body. Junmo was surprised and asked, does it dissolve muscles? Sangwoo turned away, heading for the exit, and replied that it was quite entertaining. He turned to look at the clones gathered behind him and said that they were moving out. When they got back, he would buy everyone something to eat. At these words, the clones were greatly surprised. Later that night, Sona went to the warehouse of the Yellow Guild and told her companion on the phone that she was almost there. So he wants her to bring all the crystals from the Canis Guild, right? She figured she'd contact him when she was done. She shoved her phone in her pocket and continued walking towards the warehouse, wondering if she could do all this on her own. She shifted her gaze to the side and suddenly froze in place when she saw the corpse of one of the workers. She noticed a few more corpses on the ground and ran over to them, calling for security along the way. After that, she noticed a huge hole in the warehouse wall and quickly ran from there. She used her radar skill, and a system window appeared in front of her. She exclaimed, "Who dared even think of robbing the Yellow Guild warehouse?" On the map that appeared in front of her, she saw red dots all over the warehouse that marked her enemies, and said that she could see where they were hiding. Let them come out immediately. She continued to run towards the warehouse, but suddenly something invisible grabbed her by the neck and forced her to stop. Sona didn't even know what it was at first and thought she was sure she'd only found someone in the vault. Trying to loosen the invisible hands around her neck, she asked who he was. The assailant did not respond. He hit her on the back of the head, and then she wheezed in pain and fell to the ground. Chang Shang, who had just come out of the invisible state, appeared behind her and asked with a smile did she expect to get an answer when they disappeared. He looked down at her body on the ground and asked, "Did they take everything?" The men took the boxes of crystals and confirmed his words. Then they poured the incendiary liquid all over the warehouse, and Chang Shang pointed a small light at the floor and said they should cover up all the evidence. Immediately after, the warehouse burst into flames, and the men with the boxes began to run faster. Chang Shang looked at the bright flames against the night sky and said that they had resolved the crystal issue for now. Now they need to find out who stole their supplies. Meanwhile, Sangwoo and the others were flying between the mountains of Iceland. A few minutes later, the plane landed on the ground among the fir trees, and the strong wind currents that appeared after landing swirled around. The airlock opened, letting in mountain air inside the plane, and Sangwoo looked outside and said that this was his first time visiting another country. He and his clones got off the plane and approached a people in black suits who met him at the portal to Odin's Tower, which was the portal of Valhalla. Around the bright red portal that burned with fire, there were stones arranged in a circle. One of the men in black suits asked, "Is he young Sangwoo?" "Mr. Parkwanti is waiting for him to leave. He can leave right now." Sunwoo agreed and went ahead, thinking Odin's Tower. Then, he went into the burning portal, and the clones followed him. As soon as he came out, he saw the boundless space and rocks from the side. He looked around and thought, "Is this the entrance to the tower?" Bottomless rock and deep space on the other side. It doesn't look like a tower at all. He walked towards the snowy cliffs and suddenly shivered, saying that he was so cold, they need to go to the guild barracks as soon as possible. His clones agreed and went straight after him. Meanwhile, in the tent, Wanty asked if the Yellow Guild vault had been robbed. It seemed like a well-thought-out plan. All the crystals collected by the guildy sappered. His deputy asked who could have done this. Don't they know what kind of person Haruhiro is? At the same time, Sunwoo entered the tent, pushing the cloth aside, and called out to Wanty. The guild leader and his deputy were very happy to see him and rushed to him from all sides, touching his hands and telling him that he was finally here. Sunwoo, a little taken aback by their reactions, said that this day had finally arrived. He told the deputy head that they had not seen each other. One of them said that they had prepared a coat. "It's quite cold here." Sunwoo thanked them, and the other guild members in the tent looked at him, and one of them asked, "Is that him?" The guy standing next to me said it looked like it. After that, Sunwoo and all his clones put on a warm coat. And Wanty went to the wall where the map was displayed on the projector and said that the red cross marked Theplis where the first team disappeared. It is 40 kilometers from the entrance. Sunwoo thought that it was too short a distance to cover for a whole month. He said it wasn't as far as he expected. Wanty said that they were experiencing a food problem, so they were moving slowly. He handed him 3 scrolls and said that they had prepared 3 teleportation scrolls just in case. He thinks each of his clones should take one. They are important to their plan, so let him keep them. Number 4, Number 6, and Number 5 each took a scroll. Sunwoo asked how to use them. Wanty replied that the location was already marked on the scroll. All they had to do was tear them up. The deputy head said that they told the first team to report on the situation at 2 p.m. She was sure that there were traces of the battle on the site, so it would be easy for him to find the right spot. Wanty turned off the projector and asked if he had any more questions. Sangwoo thought for a few seconds and then asked, what is he going to eat for dinner when he gets back with his sister? The question surprised Wanty slightly at first, but then he smiled and said that they would make a home-cooked meal. After that, Sunwoo ordered the clones to take the sword and potion. Number 1 took the cursed sword and strapped it on his belt, telling Sunwoo that they were going. He crossed his arms and agreed, and after that, all the clones left the tent and headed deeper into the dungeon. They came to a huge wall and Number 1 touched it, and then his hand started to sink into it and so they went on. Sang-woo, meanwhile, sat down on a chair and closed his eyes, saying that he should go too. He activated the familiar skill and sank into the body of one of the clones. Wanti shifted his gaze to Sang-woo and became worried, thinking that everything was now in his hands. Meanwhile, Sang-woo was in the body of number 1 and started making his way towards the tower. Finally, there was a light ahead and Sang-woo thought that everything was fine. It was working perfectly. As soon as they came out of the dark place, a strong gust of wind immediately gushed towards them, and Sang-woo thought that the snowstorm was too strong. Its resistance to cold is relatively high, but the cold is still felt. He reached the very edge of the cliff and stopped. Looking into the distance, there were only ice rocks around, glaciers ahead, and a staircase that led up. Sang-woo looked around in delight and thought that it was here, Odin's tower. He noticed the clones standing behind him and said they had arrived. Suddenly, for some reason, he decided to look at his hands, and then clenched them into a fist several times, testing the movements. The clones didn't take their eyes off him, and Sang-woo thought it was a strange feeling. He has total control over number 1's body. Because the familiar skill has reached level 17, it now not only shares all of the target's senses, but also controls it. Sang-woo clenched his hand into a fist again, and thought that of course, he could just tell them where to go. But it didn't seem so real before, and now he's moving on his own. He once again looked into the distance and told the others to move forward. They must save the first team. They walked on and noticed a passage ahead that was blocked by Ice Sun, who touched the ice, and said that the monsters that appear at the very beginning are frozen bats. Immediately after his words, bats swooped down on them from all directions, but the clones immediately repelled the attacks. Ignoring them, Sang-woo said that they were E-class monsters that appeared at the very beginning of the tower. They always fly in groups. The clones continued to fight off the bats that surrounded them from all sides, and Sang-woo said that they needed to keep an eye on all directions. One of the distinguishing features is that each group has a boss. After saying this, a huge bat appeared in front of him. It was the boss, a D-class monster. Seeing the enemy, Sun-woo unsheathed his sword and said that he would deal with it. After finishing off the little bats, the clones pounced on the boss from all directions and launched quick and precise strikes, causing blood to gush everywhere. Sang-woo, who hadn't even taken a step, froze in place and continued to watch as they quickly dealt with the monster. Then, with a frustrated and awkward gesture, he lowered the sword and slid it back into its scabbard. He went on and said that they would continue on their way. The clones followed, leaving only the corpses of the monsters behind them. As time passed, they encountered more monsters on the way, and Sang-woo swung his sword, cutting the bat in half. The monster's severed corpse fell down next to him, and he sighed, saying that there was no end to them, even though they were small things. He asked how far they had come. Number 2 said it was about 13 kilometers. Sun-woo thought about it and asked, "So it's about a quarter of the way. If you believe the information from the briefing, new monsters will appear soon." Right after that, snow trolls jumped out from behind the ice pillars and all the clones froze in place. Sun-woo looked at the monsters and said that they were just thinking about them. The others readied their weapons, and then one of the trolls growled loudly, preparing to attack them with a club. One of the clones used the magic bullet skill, which charges the bullet with mana before firing, and fired directly at the troll's head. The monster quickly died and fell to the ground. And Sang-woo told the clones that they should have 3 people supporting them from behind and 2 from the front. After seeing their fellow trolls die, the trolls became even more furious, and they all rushed towards Sang-woo and his team at once. They also ran forward and joined the battle. The clones moved clearly and quickly, some attacking the trolls so that they were in front of everyone, and some providing support from behind. Number 6 killed another troll on the way, while Sang-woo swung his sword and cut the troll's body in half. He looked up at this fallen enemy and thought it was super. If they can continue like this, then. But all of a sudden, he felt the ground shake, and small rocks started bouncing, and everyone froze in place, trying to keep their balance. Sang-woo looked down and noticed that the ground beneath his feet had cracked. He became very agitated, and right after that, a huge icy hand rose up from the ground and lifted him up in the palm of his hand. Meanwhile, in the guild tent, everyone was worried. The deputy head looked at Sang-woo and asked, "Is that guy going to be okay?" The first team is their most elite attacking team, but even they had a tough time. Wanti said that she shouldn't worry so much. To be honest, he was planning an operation where they could pass the tower quietly, avoiding the monsters as much as possible, and save the first team. The minimum rank for a hunter who could participate in such an operation is C. However, young Sangwoo's hunter growth rate exceeded all of his expectations. Who would have thought that in half a year, he would be able to raise each of his stats by about 20 points. Now they already correspond to rank B. This caused the deputy head to be very surprised, and he said that more importantly, his clones also became stronger. Of course, their stats are lower than the original, but their movements are superior. It's no exaggeration to say that they also have the skills of a B-rank hunter. The deputy head of Thoughtful looked at Sangwoo and said that the average rank of the first team was B. Is he saying that this guy alone is equal to the entire team? When he said that's how he sees it. If the Yellow Guild warehouse hadn't been robbed, he would have been able to become even stronger with the crystals. She raised her hand to her chin thoughtfully and asked, in that case, apart from the ice golem mentioned in the report, no monster on the first floor would be able to stop it, right? Wanty replied that he had warned him about the golem, so he should be able to avoid it and pass on unhindered, despite the fact that it will be more difficult for him to pass unnoticed. At this moment, Sangwoo was already facing an ice golem with one red eye burning on its head. The ice golem itself was holding Sangwoo in the palm of its hand and was much bigger than him. Sangwoo was very nervous to see such a huge monster and thought that he was in trouble. He focused on the upcoming battle and cut his finger with the cursed sword, drawing blood. Right after that, red sparks flared up around the sword, and Sangwoo struck out with a sharp swing of his sword. But this blow didn't do any damage to the golem, and the monster looked down at Sangwoo, which made him even more nervous and said that it was his fault. The monster screamed loudly in rage, opening its mouth wide, and then slammed its fist into its palm. But Sangwoo managed to jump out of the way in time. He jumped down and thought that if he couldn't cut it with his sword, then he couldn't deal any damage either. At the same time, the trolls ran to attack. They saw the enemy in the golem and began to beat him on the legs. Suddenly, the golem grabbed one of the trolls and lifted it to its mouth. He popped a whole troll into his mouth and chewed on it, causing blood to gush out of his mouth. Sunwoo, who was standing next to the clones, was very surprised at the sight. The ice golem once again reached down and slammed its hand into the ice. Sunwoo realized what the monster was trying to do and told all the clones to quickly run to the scattering area. All the clones quickly moved out of the line of impact, and the golem swung its arm sharply to the side and broke the ice, causing the trolls to be thrown up. Sunwoo, meanwhile, landed near the end. Thought that he had said to aim for the core. He looked at the monster that was already bringing the next prey to its mouth and thought, but where is the core? He noticed a huge chunk of yellow ice in the ice golem's chest and thought that he had found it. The question is, how can he destroy it? The clones started shooting at the monster, but they didn't do any damage to it. Sunwoo thought that the magic bullets didn't leave a single scratch on him. All of a sudden, the huge ice golem swung its arm, looking directly at Sangwoo, and then smashed the ground with all its strength, causing cracks to appear on the ice that were spreading so fast in the surrounding area. Sangwoo told the others to quickly move out of the affected area, but before they could even take a step, sharp icicles trembled and began to fall from the ceiling and block their path. At the same time, the golem started attacking again. It quickly sent its fist straight at number 5 and struck out, crushing his body. Sangwoo called out to number 5 worriedly and thought that it was number 5 who had the teleportation scroll that he should destroy. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him, and he thought, teleportation. He immediately charged forward towards the ice golem's huge fist. This monster gently took number 5 by the leg and started to lift him up. Sangwoo, meanwhile, increased his speed by exerting all his strength, and the golem had already raised number 5 and opened its mouth wide to devour him. Sangwoo approached the monster and, pushing off from the ground, jumped up and went straight to the mouth. With each passing second, number 5 was getting closer to the monster's mouth. Sunwoo stretched out his hand, approaching him, and suddenly the golem released number 5 and its mouth snapped shut. The rest of the clones froze, looking at the golem in shock and not seeing Sunwoo anywhere. But he immediately jumped away from the monster, pushing off its teeth and began to fall down. He failed to land successfully and rolled on the ground, getting hit by the ice. At this time, the golem froze in place and seemed to sense something, and its red eye lit up. Finally stopping, Sang-woo laughed, then sat down, and called the monster a jerk with a smile and asked, "Does he like what he just swallowed?" He stretched out his hand and showed him the torn part of the scroll, asking if he knew what it was, right? Suddenly, the core on the golem's chest lit up, its body began to crack, and a bright black-red flash appeared near its core, which separated it from the golem's body. Sensing this, he shouted loudly. A few minutes ago, when Sang-woo was just approaching the golem's body. Sensing this, he shouted loudly. A few minutes ago, when Sang-woo was just approaching the golem, he was reaching for a scroll and thought that this teleportation scroll that number 5 had, if it couldn't destroy the core, it would just teleport it out of the body. With that thought in mind, he quickly tore up the scroll and let the golem devour the fragments along with number 5's body. Right now, the monster was shouting loudly as the portal grew rapidly in size, while Sang-woo slowly got to his feet and sighed from exhaustion. The monster's scream grew louder, the portal carried the core and immediately collapsed, and a huge round hole appeared on the monster's chest. Right after that, the golem's entire body cracked and started to crumble apart, falling to the ground while Sang-woo thought that the people in the tent must be really scared. Meanwhile, a huge chunk of ice fell on the tent and someone shouted, "What is this? A piece of ice?" At this time, the system informed Sang-woo that his strength, health, stamina, mana, and other stats had increased. The level of the cloning skill has increased, his skill is now level 7, and he can summon 7 clones. Sang-woo was overjoyed and said that it had finally happened. He almost cried and thought that unlike the other skills, it couldn't raise the level of his cloning skill. He raised his head to the sky and said that no matter what, he wouldn't call for another one just yet. He ordered the others to continue on, and they all moved on together, skirting through a cage of the ice golem. Meanwhile, George Lucas was taking a shower in his home. After bathing, he turned off the water, came out of the shower, and put on a bathrobe, and suddenly there was a notification sound. His subordinate said that a list of people who requested a meeting with him this month is ready. A panel with a list of people appeared in front of George, and as he flipped through them, he noticed something. He flipped through the list again and asked, "Are there any South Korean guilds?" His subordinate replied that no one this month, it's all people. George was surprised, and as I put on my I thought it must be some kind of nonsense. He buttoned up the buttons and thought that something had changed. He tightened his tie and told the subordinate that he was refusing everyone. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and said that there was still time to start the academy's opening ceremony. At the same time, a man from the shooting range was eating hot noodles, and Jun-seok was sitting across from him and said it was no wonder he couldn't reach him. So he was caught by the Silver Moon Guild. The man confirmed his words and said that to be more precise, Hee-sung handed him over to them because he brought trouble. Jun-seok said that he must be quite a talented guy after all. How did he get away from those nasty? The man hesitantly replied that they had helped him a little. Yoon-suk continued to stare at him and said nothing. And then he said that the main thing is that everything is fine now. Changwon has been busy lately, so let him help him. The man agreed, and then there was an insistent knock on the door. Yoon-suk went to the door and opened it a crack, asking who was there. But instead of answering, a fist flew into his face, smashing the door open and knocking him back. The man excitedly called out to Yoon-suk, who was barely able to stand and clenching his teeth in pain. Suddenly, Chang Ji-young followed the unknown man into the house and, with a smile, called the man from the shooting range Park Gapsu and asked, "So that's where he was? It won't take long. Let him answer. Who attacked their guildmates in the hunting grounds for his information? He's the third person they've asked. He will see if he is also ignorant or not." Jun-seok was very angry at the unexpected greeting and said that he was a jerk. He immediately got to his feet and charged at Chang Ji-young, exclaiming, "What did he do in someone else's house?" As soon as his fist got close to Chang Ji-young's face, he blocked the punch with one hand. Jun-seok was surprised by this and thought, "Did he block the kick?" Chang Ji-young asked, "He likes to show off his strength, right?" He smiled, still holding his fist, and then said that he was also quite strong. After saying that, he clenched his fist so hard that Jun-seok held in pain and started to fall to his knees. Chang Ji-young quickly pulled him over and squeezed his right hand for a punch, telling him that from now on, he should make sure that he can handle the opponent first and only then run into him. Along with that, he slapped Jun Ji-young across the face with all his strength, causing blood to splatter on his face, and said with a smile that it really annoys him when people like him play tough. Gapsu was very concerned for Yoon-siak and covered him with his body, asking Changzong to stop. He would go with them, let him just stop. Changzong stopped and looked at him in surprise, then hit him and asked him what kind of nonsense he was talking about. He approached Yoon-siak again and grabbed him by his clothes, telling him that he would go with them anyway. But why does he sound like he's doing them a favor? He hit her again and asked Gapsu, is it because he thinks he's being beaten up because of him? Changshang's subordinates stood nearby and continued to watch, but they were uneasy. Chang Ji-young continued to punch Yoon-siak in the face and said that he shouldn't feel guilty because he would die because of Yoon-siak's arrogance. He slapped him across the face again, but this time he used more force and was thrown back. Gapsu looked at Yoon-siak, who was already on the verge of losing consciousness, with fear in his eyes. Chang Shang came up to him again and raised his foot to hit him in the face again. But suddenly Gapsu asked him to wait and exclaimed that he knew. Chang Shang asked what he knew. Gapsu knelt in front of him and bowed, saying that he knew the one who attacked the guild. He knows who it is. His tears fell to the floor, and he asked him to show mercy for once. Having achieved the desired result, Chang Shang ran his hand through his hair and laughed, asking his subordinates, did they see this? His subordinates became even more nervous, and he said with a creepy smile that he said they would get something good if they beat them up. At this time, Sunwoo and his clones were making their way through the snowstorm. Ahead of them, they saw skeletons in coats lying motionless on the ground. Sunwoo raised his hand and said that they should slow down now. All the clones obeyed his order, and after that, Sangwoo said that they should slow down now. All the clones obeyed his order, and after that, Sangwoo said that from now on, let them be on their guard at all times. They agreed and moved on, drawing their weapons, and Sangwoo thought it was strange, they haven't seen any monsters in a while. He looked at the snowfield that was littered with skeletons and thought that there were only dead bodies instead. He understands why they had to abandon them. It's hard to recover a body here, but who killed them all? He turned to the clone and asked where they were now. He replied that they were near their destination. Sunwoo said that from now on, they need to look for any traces of the battle of the attack team, as they must hide in the subspace near the battle site. Do they have to check the situation every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? How many minutes are left until that time? Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly noticed that number 6 abruptly approached him and raised a knife over him. And immediately that blood spurted out. A few drops of blood fell on the white snow. And Sangwoo saw that his clone had protected him from the sharp ice blade by offering his hand and knife. He shifted his gaze to the side and saw who the owner of that sharp piece of ice was. In front of them was a monster that looked like an ice golem, but it was slightly transparent and smaller in size. Sangwoo was wary and thought, what is it? He looked at the monster's face and thought, did it suddenly appear out of nowhere? Does this monster have an invisibility skill? Not far from them, another trail of an invisible monster appeared in the snow, and sounds began to be heard from the side. Sangwoo furrowed his brows, and his heart began to race as he saw hundreds of similar monsters that appeared out of nowhere walking towards them. Sangwoo thought that might explain the dead bodies. Is that why the team couldn't get to the entrance? They failed to detect their presence earlier, and now they are trapped? Number 6's hand trembled. He continued to restrain the monster's sharp blade. And then he abruptly pushed the monster away from him and threw it back. Sunwoo jumped behind the monster's back at this time. And before it could look back, it immediately slashed the monster's body with its sword. After that, he sheathed his sword and told the clones that they would break through from the other side. His clones agreed, and after that, Sangwoo ordered them to run forward, and they immediately rushed to attack, hitting the monsters from all sides. Sangwoo hit one of them and noticed that his opponent was disappearing into thin air, shouting to the others that they were disappearing again. Sunwoo and the clones formed a circle facing their opponents, and they all disappeared at once. Sangwoo frowned and thought that he couldn't see them. All of a sudden, his clones were attacking and deflecting, and Sangwoo was standing still, wondering how his clones were blocking the creature's attacks. For them, it seems to be very simple. He'd better get number 1 back in control of his body and watch. The cursed sword flashed red sparks, and Sangwoo told number 1 to act. Let him cut a path. Number 1 swung his sword and obeyed the order, quickly charging forward to meet the invisible monster. Suddenly, a faint sound of wind reached Sangwoo's ear. Number 1 also heard the sound and quickly blocked the kick. And Sangwoo thought that he was able to do it. At the same time, another monster appeared behind Number 1. But he quickly reacted and turned around, swinging his sword and knocking it back. Sangwoo focused and looked at the other clones that were fending off the attacks, thinking that it was the sound of the wind. They react to the wind noise caused by the movements of those monsters. He thought he was already skilled enough to copy their skills, but not yet. He had a long way to go. The battle continued as the first team members sat inside the subspace. One of them called out to the captain, but she didn't answer. Then he raised his voice and called out to her again, and she slowly opened her eyes and asked what. She looked very exhausted, and a member of her team said that it was almost 2 p.m. and they needed to check the situation outside. Wearily, she replied that he was right. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? She wonders if the rescue team is here today. She put her trembling hands on her lap and slowly stood up and was about to tell the others not to lose hope, but suddenly stopped in mid-sentence and thought that she couldn't even tell them not to lose hope. She opened a hole in the subspace and thought that she was sure today would be the same as yesterday. They will once again be greeted by the eerie, icy quiet field. Contrary to her expectations, it was completely different. Instead of silence, she heard the sound of blows, and all her fatigue was immediately dispelled. Dumbfounded, she asked, "Are these sounds?" At this time, Sangwoo was sitting in body Number 1 and trying to recognize the location of monsters from the sounds. One on the right, he thought. Right after that, Number 1 turned to the side and parried the attack. Sangwoo caught the sounds behind him and thought that one was on the left. Number 1 immediately turned around and repelled the attack of 2 monsters at once. And Sangwoo cursed and thought that there were 2 of them. He thinks he can fight 2 if he watches a little longer. Number 1 charged forward, cutting down several monsters at a time, and Sangwoo thought that they didn't have high speed or defense. With the exception of invisibility, the rest is not dangerous. Number 1 heard sounds from the side and quickly dodged the punch, and then he abruptly ducked and dodged 2 punches at once. Then he blocked the attacks of several monsters with his scabbard and sword at once, and Sangwoo thought that there were too many of them. The clones were constantly getting wounds, and Sangwoo thought that no matter how small the wounds were, they were still wounds. A lot of small wounds can't be ignored. A huge number of monsters were closing in on them from all directions, and Sangwoo thought he'd better get out of here. It can't count whether there are a huge number of monsters were closing in on them from all directions, and Sangwoo thought he'd better get out of here. It can't count whether there are hundreds or 1,000 of them. He looked up at the sky and saw a red blob slowly opening up. Sunwoo realized that this was the entrance to subspace and thought they had found them. This is the first team. He regained control of Number 1's body and charged forward, telling the others to run in the direction of subspace. Yuna meanwhile looked outside and was very surprised to see Sangwoo, and then she turned to the members of her team and exclaimed that there is a person. Someone is outside. The members of her team and exclaimed that there is a person, someone is outside. The members of her squad were very surprised, and someone asked, "Is this true?" They listened to the sounds outside, and one of them said that he could hear something too. They all looked out through the hole together and saw several people running towards them at once with a curtain of snow rising behind them. They exclaimed that it was true. There was a true person there. Are they here to save them? In an attempt to see what was outside, one of the squad members pulled the other by the hair, and he exclaimed in displeasure, telling him not to do that. Yuna took a closer look at the people running towards them and suddenly noticed something behind them. One of her eyes lit up with a blue light, and she saw that hundreds of monsters were running in the curtain of snow. She shrank back and exclaimed in horror that this madman was leading monsters. The others were also scared, and Sangwoo shouted they had come to save them. They continued to run into subspace at full speed, and he shouted that, if that was the case, then let them save him as well. Seeing that he was running away from the monsters, Yuna snapped her fingers and called out for the team. She widened the passageway and told every Oneto support him. Her team members immediately drew their weapons, and an old man stepped forward. He slammed the shield down on the snow and told them not to waste any time. An orange protective barrier formed from his shield, completely blocking the entrance to subspace. The mage behind him was chanting a spell. His magic arrow skill activated, and he took a step forward, pointing his staff at the monsters. Magic circles appeared around them, from which several dozen magic arrows rushed forward at once, piercing the bodies of the pursuers of San W. There was a rumble, a snow curtain appeared near the shield, and after a few seconds, Sanwoo and his clones immediately ran out of it, and they ran behind the barrier. The monsters also ran after him, but they hit the barrier and couldn't get any further. Sanwoo had already run into subspace and fell to the floor, saying that they were saved. Yuna went up to the shield man and said they were closing the entrance, let him remove the shield. He agreed, and after that, she snapped her fingers, and at the same time, he removed the shield. The huge hole in the subspace disappeared from the snowfield, and the monsters stopped moving. Sunwoo caught his breath and thanked them, then said that he was the rescue team of the Assault First Team. At least he was the one who is saved now. The first team members were silent, looking at him strangely. And after that, Yuna said that she had to ask something. He's from the Canis Guild, right? Sangwoo removed the mask from his face and replied that it was only partially. His name is Young Sangwoo, and he came here on behalf of the head of the Canis Guild, Park 1T. The old man was overjoyed and said that he had not abandoned them. The other team members were also happy. But Yuna suddenly remembered Seung-T and asked if he was okay. Seung-Woo thought, Seung-T, it's probably about the man who escaped with the teleportation scroll. He replied that he was alive, but as far as he knew, he never woke up. Yuna was very worried after hearing this news, and Sangwoo adjusted his cap and thought that she was so worried about her teammates. After a short pause, he said that they needed to get them out of here first. Captain Parkwanti is waiting for the entrance to Odin's Tower, probably very worried, but generally fine. They won't keep him waiting, so he suggests we get out of here as soon as possible. He has the teleportation scrolls with him. For some reason, this news did not please the team members. Yuna hesitantly spoke up and then fell silent, and Sangwoo looked at her worried face and thought, what's wrong? He thought she would be happier. Something doesn't add up. In the beginning, the group consisted of 10 people, and one used the scroll, so now there should be 9 of them. Yuna squeezed her coat with a trembling hand and said that she understood that it was extremely shameless to forgive him. But she still asked him to help them again. She hesitantly grabbed her shoulder, and then Sangwoo asked in surprise, what do you mean? She replied that one of their team members had died during the mission. She looked down and said they couldn't leave her in a godforsaken place. Now he understood why there were only 8 of them. He had expected this outcome after the report of the wounded man, but he said it meant there was only one fatality. What exactly happened? Yuna replied that it was an ambush. When they were all walking together in a snowy field, their healer was attacked. One of the team members turned around and saw blood gushing from her wound. Their healer, who was walking behind them, died. The old man looked down in frustration and said that if only he had paid more attention to Sun. Another team member said it happened so suddenly. Sangwoo thought that when they were ambushed, he was the first one to get hit. They may attack the most vulnerable element of the team first. Yuna said that when Song was attacked, she opened the dimension and ordered everyone to retreat. She also wanted to fight, but if something happened to her, her team would have no place to hide. They immediately reported the situation with a telepathy scroll. Everything happened so chaotically that they didn't notice that one monster was torn inside. And they noticed it only when one of the boxes with food fell by itself. Seung-T immediately ran to Yuna to protect her, and several scrolls fell out of the boxes. As a result, the monster wounded him and tore all the scrolls at the same time. And then a bright spark flashed, which meant the portal appeared. And he left. Sunwoo wondered if that was when they lost the rest of the scrolls. He said that the teleportation portal closed before the team could pass through it. Yuna confirmed his words and said that if she left the tower, this space would immediately disappear, and her team would lose the shelter with supplies and, most likely, would die. Sunwoo asked where the body of the deceased was. Yuna snapped her fingers, revealing a hole behind her, and Sangwoo saw a body lying on the snowfield. Yuna said she was there. Sunwoo saw where it was and thought it was a bit far away. It will be impossible to reach it without encountering monsters. She didn't run away because of a team member's corpse being stuck here for half a year. So he can't tell her to just leave it here. He agreed and said they would take her body. The team member was immediately overjoyed and Yuna thanked him with a slight smile. But suddenly he said that he had conditions and her smile froze on her face. He said that in the first place, he came here to save them, not to increase the number of victims. If he thinks for even a second that the plan is doomed to fail, then hell lives with the living. Yuna looked down again in frustration and said that she understood. But I'm sure Sona wouldn't want anyone to die either. Sangwoo said that second, they would deal with it. These words surprised Yun, and after a short pause, she exclaimed that it was too dangerous. They only asked to cover them up while they took the body. She doesn't ask him to do something dangerous for them. Sun Woo told her not to worry. He crossed his arms with a smile and said that they were not real people, but clones. Yuna was very surprised and asked what he said. Meanwhile, at the JM agency, Cheng Jiyang walked over the shards with a crunching sound, and there were files and documents scattered behind him. Junmo, who was lying on the floor, reached forward with a bloody hand, and Cheng Jiyang sat on him and pressed his weight down, saying that he didn't expect that the hunter who led them was under his command. He smiled and asked, "Isn't it enough for him to be Hee-sung's enemy? He shouldn't have flashed a after being chased out of there." Junmo started panting all over as he was beaten up. And then Cheng Xin grabbed his wrist and put his foot on his elbow and said that now he would ask again. "What's the jerk's name?" Junmo gritted his teeth, bracing himself for the pain, and then told him to go to hell. Hearing this, Cheng Jiyang let out a tired sigh, then kicked his elbow with all his strength and broke his arm. There was a crunch, blood spurted out, and Junmo screamed loudly in pain. Cheng Jiyang said it was now the right hand's turn. Suddenly, he was stopped by the call of his subordinate, who came up to him with a document in his hands. He handed him the document and told him that they had found the data on him. Junmo whined in pain, and Cheng Jiyang was surprised. He started looking at the documents and asked if he had seen them. They found out anyway. On the document, he saw Sangwoo's portrait, name, nationality, address, and skill along with his phone number. Jung Jiyang said that he lives in a decent neighborhood. Have them send it to the kid's address. Yunin, who had been eavesdropping on their conversation, was faintly silhouetted near the door, but they didn't notice her. His subordinate asked, what should he do with Kong Junmo now? Cheng Jiyang replied that they would take him with them. Annan saw them and thought, how did the Silver Moon Guild get here? Things are really bad. Through his pain, Junmo asked why they were looking for hunter young Sangwoo. Cheng Jiyang sighed and said that his hunter beat up their guys, which is one of the reasons. He hadn't heard of such a thing as crystals. Junmo asked what he was talking about. Cheng Jiyang smiled and said that he was known for being a bit slow-witted, so he was sure that he didn't know anything. He took all the crystals and escaped. Does he understand now? They're the victims here. Hearing this, Enyang covered her mouth in shock and thought, do they think that the crystals were stolen by Hunter Sangwoo? What should she do now? She had to stop them. Meanwhile, Sangwoo was that the crystals were stolen by Hunter Sangwoo. What should she do now? She had to stop them. Meanwhile, Sangwoo was telling the first team about their conditions and how they were clones, and Yuna asked suspiciously, clones? But the cloning skill she knows. Sunwoo interrupted her and said that as far as she could see, his clones weren't just illusions. So she doesn't have to worry about their lives. That will be the plan. Number 4 and number 6 will take the teleportation scrolls. They will protect the entrance to this dimension, and numbers 2 and 3 will go outside with him to get the body. It's simple, right? They can't go outside. Their safety is the most important thing right now. Yuna said nothing, looking down. And then one of the guild members said that they could help. After all, Sangwoo replied that he knew they were all strong, since they were the first team of their guild. But it's his responsibility to make sure everyone gets back alive. Yuna said that it was he who drew the monster's attention to himself and rushed in their direction. Sangwoo became flustered and awkwardly replied that he had options and Kasevi didn't help him. He coughed into his fist and said that they would proceed with this plan now. So, he asked them to trust them and wait here. Yuna was silent again, looking at him with a tired look, and then closed her eyes and agreed. Sunwoo took the sword from his belt and slung it over his shoulder. Thinking that it had been 6 months since the portal incident, he focused on increasing its stats, and to do so, he fed his clone crystals after gaining a skill. He now had the passive monster absorption skill, which was currently level 12. This skill allows him to absorb the essence of the slain monster and parts off its stats with a 12% chance. Sunwoo thought that this was the secret of how he was able to obtain the stats that Guild Master Canis expected of him. But he's not going to be content with just what he has. He walked to the edge of subspace and Yuna asked, is he ready? Sunwoo confirmed her words and then looked at the potion that Annan had given him and thought that he would gladly take any opportunity to become stronger. He tucked the potion bottle under his clothes and said they were moving out. He turned to number 4 and asked him to lend him a knife. Number 4 handed him a knife, and Sangwoo threw him his sword and potion bottle, telling him to take his sword and power potion. He went up to one of the clones and said that as soon as they took the body, let him leave with the others. He agreed, and Yuna said that she wasn't sure if they'd noticed, but these monsters would stand still for days when no one was around. So the creatures they brought with them are probably in the same positions. Let them be careful. Sangwoo replied that he understood. Then Yuna snapped her fingers to open the door, and Sangwoo's face was illuminated by the light. As soon as they came out, there was a roar of wind, and the monsters didn't show any signs of their presence yet. Sangwoo shifted his gaze to the side, and when he saw a lone body in the distance, he thought she was there. He immediately charged forward, telling the others to do the same, and they ran after him. Noticing the movement, the monsters became more active and their footprints appeared on the snow. Number 4, meanwhile, was observing the situation outside. He turned to the team members and told them to stay away from the entrance. The old man asked if they were going to be okay. He still thinks they should help. Yuna didn't say anything, but after a short pause, she said that they only saw him running from the monsters towards them, but this place is located kilometers away from the entrance of the tower. You can't get here just by running away, so she suggests we trust him and wait. He said that he had a plan in case he couldn't get into the portal with them. So far, they can only hope that everything will work out. At this time, Sangwoo was running forward with his knife at the ready, and suddenly he heard a different wind whistling from his side. He quickly dodged the monster's first strike and retaliated by blocking it. The monster had to retreat, and the hand that collided with Sangwoo's knife trembled. Sangwoo smiled at this time and thought that he had managed to block the kick. He can't pinpoint the exact location, but he can still sense something. He continued to run forward despite the monsters that were coming from all directions and told the clones to keep breaking through. The target was already close, her red hair contrasting against the white snow, and Sangwoo noticed her. As he continued to run and fend off the blows, he gritted his teeth and thought that she was there, but suddenly, Number 2 didn't notice the monster and was wounded. Sangwoo noticed this and immediately turned around, exclaiming, "Are they behind you?" He pictured the map in his mind and wondered if the people behind the shield had gotten to them. In this case, they are surrounded. He uncorked a bottle of mana potion with his teeth and thought he'd better use it now. He stopped to drink the potion, and after that, he felt pain and his body shuddered. One of his eyes lit up with blue sparks, and he screamed loudly, feeling his body fill with power. He took out his gun and thought that he needed to shoot without hitting the corpse. His magic bullet skill activated. Right after that, he pointed the gun towards the corpse and shot out a powerful stream of energy that hit all the enemies in the way. Pieces of the monster's bodies flew apart, and the path to the corpse was cleared. Noticing such a powerful explosion in the direction of their comrade's corpse, the first team members became very excited, but the powerful flow of energy dissipated just in front of the corpse itself. Sangwoo thought it was super. Now he can go. He gritted his teeth and asked Number 2, can he move? He said there was no problem with that. Then Sangwoo told him to grab the body, and Number 2 and Number 3 took off CEOE's cloaks and covered Zhang's body with them. While they were doing this, Sangwoo stood guard and thought that the mana was still flowing into his body. He feels like he's about to explode. Suddenly, the skin on his body began to crack, and he felt it, shouting to the clones that he would distract their attention. His entire body was surrounded by powerful energy, and he attracted the attention of the monsters to himself. Several footprints immediately appeared on the snow. All the monsters immediately came rushing at him from all directions as he continued to emit powerful bursts of mana. As soon as the monsters got close enough to them, Sangwoo told others to run. They immediately rushed towards subspace, and he stamped his foot with all his might, breaking the ice and preventing the monsters from approaching. Huge chunks of ice rose up from his footsteps, throwing up the monsters, while Number 2 and 3 were already far away. They looked resolutely ahead, and when they saw the entrance to subspace, they rushed there. They ran up to the entrance and said they had taken her. Yuna was overjoyed and thanked them with a big smile, and then the clones entered subspace. One of them tore open the teleportation scroll, and a huge portal immediately appeared in front of them. The old man became worried, and a huge portal immediately appeared in front of them. Yuna said there was still one left. Number 2 told her not to worry. It's just a clone. Outside, however, there was complete confusion. chunks of ice forming sharp rocks, sparks raging among them, and monsters flying in that direction. Sunwoo was standing in the middle of these rocks, looking towards the subspace entrance and no longer paying attention to the monsters' strikes. Noticing that they were all inside, he gave a barely noticeable sign, and number 3 said that they had to go. He led Yun towards the portal, but she resisted and looked towards Sangwoo, who was left all alone. As the clones led her into the portal, she held out her hand and screamed out of concern for San-W. After all the team members and their captain had passed through the portal, the subspace entrance closed and a bright red flash disappeared from the snowfield. Seeing this, Sangwoo smiled slightly. The skin on his face continued to crack, and he took off his cap and said that they would see each other on the other side. The sparks around him flashed even stronger, and right after that, there was a bright flash that illuminated the monsters all around. A moment later, there was a massive explosion that blew up the glacier and killed all the monsters around. He received a system notification that the monster absorption skill was activated, and he absorbed the characteristics of the ice defender. His strength, reflexes, mana, and resistance to cold weather increased. Since he killed all the monsters around him with one blast, he received many more such notifications about stat upgrades. Meanwhile, the bearded man was visiting Shang-Ti at the hospital. He peeled the apple and told Mr. Seung-Ti that this day had come. Today, they were on a rescue mission. The mission should be over by now, so it's time for him to wake up, so that he can greet the others with a smile. Seung-Ti's finger twitched at that. Meanwhile, there was a worried atmosphere at the temporary tent at the entrance of the tower. Wan Ti and his second-in-command noticed a bright flash from the portal behind them, and a strong wind swirled in the tent, forcing them to cover their faces. Wan Ti exclaimed that it was a portal. His second-in-command asked if it was an assault team. Yellow-gloved hand appeared from the portal, and Wan Ti suddenly remembered the events of that day. Sun Ti also came out of the portal with a wound in his stomach, and the sight shocked Wan Ti. He squeezed his eyes shut, just to avoid seeing the same situation, and waited. The portal closed, leaving a brief flash of light behind, and Wan Ti was still standing there, eyes closed, one hand clutching his coat nervously. Still, he plucked up the courage to open his eyes. In front of him, he saw the vague silhouette of his sister, and then his vision became sharper, and he clearly saw her shocked eyes staring straight at him. When he saw his sister, he only sighed, looking at her with the same shocked eyes, and then smiled slightly as a tear ran down his cheek. He said she was finally back. At the same time, Sanwoo shifted back into his body. Feeling the pain, he clutched his head and thought that this was the first time he had felt an explosion on himself. He looked up and saw that Wan Ti and his sister were already standing next to each other. Hearing the words that she was back, Yun's eyes filled with tears, and she asked, "How else? He doesn't need to cry." She smiled and told him not to let him say that the guild had fallen into disrepair while she was gone. Her brother reached out to her with a trembling hand, and she was about to say something else. But suddenly he hugged her tightly, and she froze. He started crying again, and said that everything was fine now. Yuna froze in place, fighting back tears, and clenching her hand into a fist. And her brother said that they were finally all back. She tried to hold back her tears, but her lips trembled treacherously, and she called out softly to her brother. She put her trembling hands on her brother's back and hugged him back, telling him that Sona had died because of her. After that, she still couldn't help but cry, sobbing loudly. Choking on her tears, she said that she thought no one would come for them. She was so scared. The rest of the guild members and Sanwoo smiled as they watched the siblings reunite. One thanked her for returning safely. The two of them continued to cry, while the people in the hospital room were very surprised. The bearded man who was carving rabbits out of apples looked at the hospital bed in shock. Seung-Ti woke up and said with a smile that he needed to go home. Time passed. The tent was already being rolled up, and all the equipment was being taken away. Sanwoo was looking at his stats, and his clone came up behind him and told him that here was a sword, potions, and a teleportation scroll. Sanwoo said that he did a good job. He gripped the sword in his hand when he saw that the system showed that his stats had improved. He looked at the system window in surprise and wondered, did the stats increase so much this time? Suddenly, Wan Ti suddenly called out to him from behind, making him jump. He turned around and saw Wan Ti and his sister standing in front of him. They both bowed to him, and Wan Ti said thank you. That's the only thing he can say. Sangwoo waved his hands awkwardly and said it wasn't worth it. Let them raise their heads. He was only doing a job for which he was well paid. Wanty said that wasn't enough. He looked up at him and said with a slight smile that he should contact him if he was in trouble one day, then he would help him in any way he could. The Canis Guild will always give him the support he needs, he promises. Sangwoo gave him a thumbs up and said he understood. He suddenly remembered the teleportation scroll and took it out, saying that one of the scrolls he used to defeat the icy golem, but one remained. He handed it to Wanty and told him to take it back. Wanty looked at the light indifferently and said that he could keep it for himself. In any case, he expected to give him everything that was left after the expedition. Sangwoo put one hand on his waist and asked, "What is he saying? This belongs to the Canis Guild, so it's awkward for him to take it for himself." Wanty hesitantly took it back and said that since that was the case, After that, he and his sister went to the portal, and she looked at Sangwoo, who was crying from losing the scroll, and asked, "Has he been here all this time?" Her brother confirmed her words and said that he was busy controlling the clones with the familiar skill, but he was here the whole time. She tiredly touched her face and said that she thought they were real people who were just trying to calm them down like that. He said that he also didn't believe in the existence of such a skill at first. He turned around slightly, looking at Sangwoo to continue beating himself up for giving the scroll away out of politeness, and thought that he eyes from the sunlight. He's saying that it was so bright here. He approached Wanty and said that he must be very busy when he got back. He confirmed his words and said that he would need to check the health of the team. He looked at the coffin as the plane was being carried away and looked down in frustration, saying that they still had to prepare for the funeral. Sangwoo didn't say anything, looking at him sadly, and then his phone suddenly rang. He took out his phone and thought that the signal did not reach while he was in the portal. Now he receives messages. He opened a dialogue with the potion maker and was horrified when he read her message. She sent him a picture of the wrecked office and a caption saying they were in trouble. Mr. Agent was dragged away, and the assholes from the Silver Moon Guild came. She's stalking him now. When he saw the message that his agent had been kidnapped, he gritted his teeth in anger, and then walked up to Wanty and called out loudly, telling him that he had to go somewhere right now. He became agitated and asked what had happened. Sangwoo replied that the Silver Moon assholes had kidnapped Kong Junmo from the Jam Agency. Wanty exclaimed in surprise, "What does that mean? Why would they do that?" Sangwoo replied that he had a run-in with them before. They were trying to take control of the hunting ground he was going to. Wanty silently took out a teleportation scroll, then said that let him use it to enter the Silver Moon Guild. He handed him the scroll and Sangwoo said it was too much. Wanty confidently replied that he had already said so. They will do their best to support him. At this time, it was night in Korea, and Young was in the territory of the Silver Moon Guild. She peeked around the corner, looked at the guild members and thought, why isn't this freak responding to her messages? But she didn't notice someone coming up behind her. The man called out loudly to her, and before she could turn around, he grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. He approached her face and asked her if she was anything else. Why is she hanging around here? Ann was very worried and thought that things were bad. Suddenly, a red and black flash appeared behind the man who grabbed her, but he didn't notice it. Sangwoo emerged from the portal with fierce eyes, and the man told Ann that she looked familiar. The man suddenly heard sounds behind him, but Sangwoo was faster and grabbed him by the throat, while his clones surrounded the men who were wandering around. Sunwoo was faster and grabbed him by the throat, while his clones surrounded the men who were wandering around. Sunwoo asked where he was. His grip made the man gasp, and Anen, who was standing behind him, was surprised. Sunwoo furrowed his brows and asked, "Where is their Mr. Agent?" The man's body trembled, drooling from his mouth, and his eyes rolled back in his head. Young noticed this and asked Sunwoo to stop. She knows where he was taken. She went up to him and exclaimed that he would kill him like that. Sangwoo was furious, but he still listened to her and let go of the man who had already fainted. He fell to the ground with a crash, and Sangwoo told the clones to tie them up. She said they took him to the vault. Some of them patrol this place. Sunwoo took off his cloak and said it was dangerous, so let her wait here. The other clones looked in their master's direction, and he said that he was fast. Meanwhile, Cheng Xiong's voice rang out in the vault, calling Mr. Junmo. He called him several times and told him to look at it. Junmo, who was sitting on a chair, slowly opened his eyes and Cheng Xiong laughed. saying that he had fallen asleep. He's even embarrassed. There were so many guilds in the area, but why did they have to meddle in their own affairs? That's right, not many guilds control territories for hunting. He turned his gaze to the man standing next to him and asked, "Was it young Sangwoo? When will he arrive?" The man replied that he had gone abroad, so he thought they would have to wait a few hours. Chang Sheng agreed and said that some time will pass, should they order something to eat. Suddenly, there was a knock outside the vault doors, and everyone immediately turned their eyes to the entrance. This knock was replaced by a creaking sound, and suddenly the door handle moved, cutting through the steel door. The guild members continued to wait for what would happen next, and the handle accelerated, breaking the locks on the door. After that, the door opened and Sangwoo's silhouette appeared at the entrance. Who asked, "Are they from the Silver Moon Guild?" Jung Zi-young smiled and told his subordinates that he also said that he would come in a few hours. He excitedly replied that he also didn't understand how he got here so quickly. He asked, "Did he come alone?" He'd heard there were other guys wearing masks with him. He took out his phone and said that he would check if anyone else was hiding. Chang Ji-young waved his hand lazily and said that the faster the better. The other guild members who were inside took out their weapons and headed towards Sangwoo. And Junmo excitedly called out to him and asked them not to do it. Suddenly, he stopped talking, felt sick, and blood began to flow from his mouth. Sangwoo gritted his teeth and asked him to hold on a little longer. One of the guild members ran around the corner and prepared the bat. And Sangwoo's eyes turned fierce and he could barely contain his rage, saying that he would do to them what they did to him. Suddenly, a guy ran around the corner and raised a bat over him, telling him to die. But Sangwoo quickly reacted and hit him on the chest with his elbow, and then grabbed his arm and pulled him towards him. And after that, he hit the enemy's arm with his elbow and broke his arm like Ching Xiong Junmo. The man screamed in pain. And at that moment, another man ran to attack, and Sangwoo noticed him and stayed where he was, waiting for him to run up. The man with the broken arm screamed in pain and crouched down on the floor, while Sangwoo wrapped his arms around the attacker and threw a punch. After that, there was a loud shout, and Chang Xiong tiredly covered his face inside, saying that they were less freaks. Sangwoo continued to beat up everyone in his path. The sounds of blows and screams resounded in the vault. Young Zhang's subordinate stood still and looked at Sangwoo in shock. After finishing the last one, he went towards the next ones, and they were very scared and asked someone to stop him. Ching Shang poked his temple with his finger and asked what was the best way to put it. Their senior is a wise man. He expected them to get beaten up again, and he wasn't wrong, was he? The men stood in front of Sangwoo, blocking his path. And Ching Shang said that first, he wanted to say, just in case, that if he told them where he hid the crystals, they would let them go. Sunwoo asked what he was talking about, what kind of crystals? And they've already crossed the line, and this isn't going to end in peace. Chang Ji-young smiled and said that he was an impudent jerk. He took out a document with information about him and said that he found something by searching in the office. This is a document about him. He admits he's pretty strong. Judging from the way he dealt with the C-class kids, he's about at the B-class level. And his characteristics are quite good. With them, he will put most hunters on the shoulder blades. He looked up at Sangwoo and asked, but his skill is cloning, right? He let out a chuckle and asked, is that the reason why he fights them head-on without using skills? After that, he laughed even harder and shouted that there were people like him, awakened, but with poor skills. So he focused on the stats like a complete jerk. Isn't that the only way he can use a punch properly? He's pretty sure the masked guys who go with him have lousy skills too. He noticed that people like them always got together in groups. Sunwoo didn't say anything, and after a short pause, he said that he understood. At the same time, his clones entered the vault, and he said that he could test for himself and find out if they were lousy or not. Jun Mo gasped when he saw them, and the members of the Silver Moon Guild were very scared. The man leaned in close to Ching Xiong's face and said that he thought their guys outside were already overpowered. He replied with a smile that he could see for himself, so don't let him talk about it. He rose from his chair, tucking the blade behind his back, and said that at least they weren't outnumbered now. He doesn't like the idea of a group beating. Sangwoo said that he can see that he is quite confident. Now they will see how good his skill is. Chang Xiong smiled, his body turned transparent, and he said that he couldn't. He became invisible and said that he wouldn't be able to see it. After that, there were only light footsteps near the chair, and no one else saw him. One of the men got nervous and thought that this was his stealth skill. Even people with the best recognition skills won't be able to detect it. Junlo was very surprised by his skill and said that he had disappeared. Cheng Xiang had already approached Hedsing Wu and told him to try to sense his presence, let him feel the aura, but nothing would help him. His skill eliminates any signs of presence. He moved behind the clones and asked, "Have they ever experienced anything like this? They'd better get ready." The clones didn't say anything. They had already discovered him a long time ago and were only waiting for Sang Wu's command. Cheng Ji-yang smiled, readied his blade, and thought that because they wouldn't even be able to notice him. Hearing him move around, Sang Wu sighed heavily, while Cheng Ji-yang decided to attack and thought that this battle would end before it even started. Sun Wu turned around, looking directly at him, and told the clones to take him. Right after that, the clones grabbed Cheng Xiang's arms, stopping him in his tracks. He snapped out of his invisibility state and looked in shock at the clones that had captured him. They were all looking at him and grinning, but you couldn't see it under their masks. Cheng Ji-yang was very nervous and still not understanding what had happened. He asked, "What?" Meanwhile, Sang Wu's friends gathered at a place and started drinking together. They clinked their glasses together. And then Cheng Wu sighed and said it was great. Jendo smiled and said that they were already in their third year. Zhang Xiong asked, "How come it was just then? They don't have any girlfriends." His friends immediately fell silent, their faces grim, and he apologized, awkwardly offering them a drink. Chang Wu suddenly decided to change the subject. He asked, "Did they talk to Sang Wu?" Zhang Shang replied that he had changed his phone number. Chang Wu asked, "Even so, can't he contact them via messenger?" Jendo poured himself a drink and said it was possible that no, he couldn't contact him either. He raised the glass to his mouth and said that he had heard news about him. He thinks he's still working as a mercenary. Chang Wu asked in surprise, "Is that true?" He never would have thought that he would continue doing this. He's too innocent for this job. Zhang Xiang agreed and said that even when someone crosses the line, he just laughs it off. Can he kill monsters with such a temper? Jendo laughed and said they had no idea what he was capable of when he was angry. Zhang Xiang asked, "They were neighbors, right? Did he ever lose his temper?" Jendo said he thought they were in their third year of school. He was supposed to go home with Sang Wu, but he was caught by hooligans and the money was stolen. It was then that he finally noticed Sang Wu coming towards him, but he immediately ducked around the corner. This made him even more worried, and right after that, Sang Wu rushed over to help. When he saw that he was being attacked, he immediately attacked his abusers. His friend asked him, so Sang Wu saved him. Jendo asked, "Does he think so?" No, they took a couple of punches together. Later, he found out that the same guys had also robbed him before. Chang Wu was slightly surprised and asked, "Then why did he go into conflict again?" Jendo replied that it was because he got angry when they bothered him. They were surprised that an innocent child would first hand over the money and then suddenly attack them. In general, he is merciful only to himself, and when people around him feel bad, he breaks down. Meanwhile, Cheng Xiang was looking from side to side in surprise, not understanding how he was caught. And Sang Wu told the clones that they should deal with these guys and take MR, agent, to the hospital. His clones agreed, and Cheng Ji-yang exclaimed, "How did he see him?" Sang Wu said that it looked like he was confident in his skill, but he had just returned from a mission with the same monsters. Cheng Ji-yang asked dumbfounded, "What?" Sang Wu rolled up his sleeves and asked, "What was it that he said?" He had said so much in such a short time. Cheng Ji-yang tried to break out of the fight of his clones, but couldn't, and asked him to let him go. He tried a few more times, but only got tired of it, and thought that he couldn't move. Sang Wu said that first of all, his skill isn't that bad. Number 6 broke the handcuffs and freed Junmo, and Sang Wu said that he wasn't just training his physical body. But he's right about something. A strong aura began to radiate from his body, and he recalled the moment when he checked his stats and smiled at the increase in so many stats. He immediately received 142 messages about updating the characteristics. Right now, the top stats on the list have increased by about 6 points in total, and the bottom stats have increased by 2 and 3 points, not counting the cold resistance, which has increased by 14 points at once. San Wu took a fighting stance and clenched his hand into a fist, saying that he now has excellent stats. Right after saying that, he abruptly approached Cheng Ji-yang, and he asked him to wait. But it was too late. Sang Wu had already hit him in the stomach with all his strength, and he felt a lot of pain. Blood spurted from his mouth, and he wheezed in pain. The impact sent him flying backwards, and his back hit the building materials behind him. Sun Woo stood there, glaring at him in a rage, and immediately after that, dust rose and fragments of concrete blocks flew in all directions. Number 6 walked up to Sang-woo while holding Jun-mo and said that one of them had run away, and they had dealt with the others. Sang-woo said that they should not pursue him, but focus on getting the agent to the hospital. His clone agreed, and Jun-mo asked, "What about him?" Sang-woo told him not to worry, let him get help first. He looked at Chang Ji-young, who was lying among the boxes and concrete blocks, and said that it looked like he could still move. Chang Ji-young was very surprised at this time. He thought it was impossible. It was different from what was described in the report. His strength isn't 19 at all, and the other guys aren't that weak. It's impossible to escape when he's being chased by at least 2 people. He slowly got to his feet and thought that it couldn't be that he had raised his stats in such a short period of time. Something must have helped him. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, his eyes fell on the potion bottle that was peeking out of Sang-woo's pocket. He now understood why he was so strong and smirked, saying that he admits that he underestimated him. He didn't expect that he would catch it and even take it out. Sang-woo replied that he had heard these excuses many times. Chang Ji-young stepped up to meet him and told him that such a mistake wouldn't happen again. He took out a blade and said that it would let him know what a B-class hunter was like. His stats were almost equal to Sang-woo's: strength 25, reflexes 35, health 22, stamina 19, mana 13, regeneration 1, NP. His body started to fade, and he said that he didn't see everything he was capable of. Immediately after these words, he disappeared into thin air, and the concrete blocks that were around him scattered to the sides. Sang-woo said that he didn't want to know what this person was capable of. His clones understood him and immediately stepped forward, preparing to attack. Chang Ji-young, meanwhile, was running around in circles and thought that it was impossible to see him with the detection skill. But they caught him anyway. He ran too close to one of the clones, and it immediately hit him. But he managed to get back and thought that he couldn't believe it. But they must be able to detect his location by the sound of movement and immediately attack. He jumped and thought that in that case, he would do it. He pushed off from the wall and charged forward, cutting through everything in his path with his blades, and then began to move chaotically around the storage room, still swinging his blades. Boxes and building materials flew from side to side, and Sun Woo, standing in the midst of all this, thought that he was fast. He had incredible speed. He can't see it. His reflexes are better than his own. Looks like he really just underestimated him. Dust rose in the storage area, and Sang-woo looked at the boxes that were banging against the walls and floor, thinking, is this to hide the sound? But all of a sudden, the dust next to him dispersed suspiciously quickly, and Sang-woo hit Chang Ji-young, who was approaching him, asking if he was really stupid. Chang Ji-young wheezed in pain and was thrown to the side, and Sang-woo turned to him and asked, did he kick up dust to hide the sounds of his movements? It only made him see him better. Chang Ji-young started to slowly get up, but suddenly a chuckle came out of his mouth. Sang-woo didn't understand what caused his reaction and continued to stand still, while Chang Ji-young laughed even louder as he held the potion bottle in his hands. Sang-woo didn't notice the loss and said that he was completely out of his mind. What's so funny? Chang Ji-young showed him the potion bottle and asked if he could repeat it after what he saw. Sang-woo saw the bottle in his hands and immediately looked down at the pocket that was torn and empty. His clones came up to him, and Chang Ji-young laughed again and said that he knew something was wrong. Its characteristics are too different from the document from the agency. He uncorked the bottle and said that he and those guys with him probably raised the stats with this. Sang-woo said that he would give him some advice. It's better for him not to drink it, but Chang Ji-young didn't listen to him and started drinking the potion. After that, he threw the almost empty bottle to the side, and his strength began to grow rapidly. The veins on his body bulged, and he was slightly surprised by the effect of the potion. He felt a power in his body that he hadn't felt before. His strength increased to 37 units, and to test this, he decided to break the bottle with his foot, but as soon as he stamped, the entire warehouse rattled and cracks began to appear in the buildings. His strength increased to 57 units. And after that, he looked at Sang-woo with a smile and said that he didn't hear correctly. He was busy getting stronger. Sang-woo frowned and said that he shouldn't blame him for the consequences. A strong aura appeared around Chang Ji-young, and he laughed again as he looked at his hand. He thought, what is this potion? His strength doubled. This effect can't be achieved even with a potion of the best quality. He turned to young Sang-woo and asked him what he would say to that. If he tells you who created this, then he'll let him go after ripping off a couple of limbs. Sang-woo didn't answer and thought that number 4 and 6 were dragging the agent to the hospital. He must deal with it only with the second and third. He drew his sword from its scabbard and asked, "A pair off limbs." He glared at him and said that it wouldn't suit him. Chong Zi-young immediately attacked and said, with a smile, that he was a cheeky jerk. He abruptly disappeared into thin air, and Sang-woo prepared for his attacks. But Chang Ji-young decided to attack the slopes first. He quickly ran up to them and grabbed both of them with his hands, continuing to run. He knocked one of them to the floor and attacked the other with his blade. They didn't even have time to do anything. At the same time, Sang-woo entered the battle. He quickly got close to Chang Zi and attacked the other with his blade. They didn't even have time to do anything, but he immediately parried his blade, forcing him to move back. Sunwoo's blade trembled and he gritted his teeth as he looked at his opponent. Chang Ji-young stopped and asked with a laugh, is he still not aware of the situation, even after what he saw? He doesn't understand at all what he meant by reading the dossier about him. Does he think he has only studied its characteristics? These words suddenly made Sang-woo think. Meanwhile, the members of the Silver Moon Guild dealt with the man in the suit and the man with red hair. Wiping away the blood, asked, "Why is the hunter working as a security guard?" His friend behind him said they'd lost too much time. The man asked if the hunter Yong Sang-woo lived here. One of them confirmed his words, and then the man went to the house and told the others to follow him because they know his temper. After a while, Sang-woo's parents heard a knock on the door, and his father asked who was there at this hour. He went to the door and opened it a crack asking who was there. He saw the unexpected guest. He was surprised. Meanwhile, Chang Ji-young attacked again and asked, "Do you understand now?" Sang-woo blocked a couple of punches from Chang Ji-young, and he said that one phone call would be enough to bury his family alive. Hearing these words, Sang-woo missed a few punches and cuts appeared on his body. Chang Ji-young attacked again and exclaimed that it was a piece of cake. Sunwoo was thrown backward by the impact, but he managed to stay on his feet, and after that, the clones immediately attacked from behind. Chang Ji-young noticed them behind him and immediately turned around, attacking and shouting that they were stubborn creatures. Sunwoo was gripping the hilt of his sword, which was covered in blood from his wounds. The sword immediately ignited with black and red energy, and Sang-woo's eyes suddenly widened. Chang Ji-young noticed that something was wrong and turned around. But Sang-woo had already swung his sword, gritting his teeth. His punch went beyond the warehouse and sliced through the ground and parts of the building. A smooth cut appeared on the roof and wall of the warehouse, which also affected Chang Ji-young's blade. This made him very angry, and he shouted that he was a dumbass. He activated the skill with a punch and charged forward. A second later, he approached Sang-woo, swinging a burning fist at him, and said that let him die already. Sang-woo was afraid of this and couldn't do anything. But in the next instant, Chang Ji-young threw a punch and was thrown back. He was hit so hard that his body broke through the brick wall of the building and flew even further, rolling on the ground. As soon as he stopped, he coughed violently and tried to get up. Chang Ji-young didn't waste a second. He immediately went over to the clones and jumped behind number 2, then swung him sideways. Number 2 was thrown to the side, and number 3 decided to attack the enemy from behind. But he managed to duck just in time. Right after that, Ching Shang spun around, swinging his leg, and threw a punch at number 3. All the clones were thrown back to Sunwoo, who was crawling on the ground. He could barely move his hands and gritted his teeth as he said that the potion's effect was too strong. Suddenly, someone called out to him from the side, and he shifted his gaze. Anan, who was sitting behind the container with the unconscious clone and guild member, exclaimed he lost. After such a cool behavior, Sunwoo gritted his teeth and told her to shut up. He would win. Who's that next to her? An N looked at the man and said that he had recently run out and started running at her, but that guy had knocked him out. Chang Ji-young came out of the warehouse and told them to stop talking. Dust mixed with his aura was flying around him, and he smiled and asked, "Are they developing a plan B?" Sang-woo quickly got to his feet and drew his sword, telling An to hide. She immediately disappeared behind the container, and Chong Seong asked, "Does he still want to fight? Didn't he hear what he just said? Does he think he was joking about sending guys to his address?" Sang-woo gritted his teeth and thought that there wasn't much left. Chang Ji-young let out a chuckle and took out his phone, saying that it should be. That's why you need to take a photo to prove it. He called his subordinates, who were at Sam's parents' house in the meantime, and a man's voice rang out. Chang Ji-young asked, "Are they there yet? Let them cut off his parents' fingers beautifully and send him a photo." But as soon as he said those words, his hand fell limply down and dropped the phone. Chang Ji-young looked down in surprise and saw the phone banging on the ground, and then asked in fright, "What's wrong with his hand?" Following the hand, his legs gave out as well, and Chang Ji-young fell to his knees and exclaimed, "What the hell?" Sang-woo noticed what was happening to him and thought that it had finally happened. He remembered how Un had passed him a potion and said that she had made it recently, one for strength, the other for mana. There were also side effects. A power potion melts the muscles, and a mana potion causes the body to explode. Chang Xiang's body began to emit steam, and his body was covered in sweat. He was very worried about his limbs, and Sang-woo slowly walked up to him and asked, "Didn't he say so?" His face took on an intimidating look, and he said that he shouldn't have drunk it. Young Xiang, unable to move, looked at Sang-woo in fright and then looked at the phone, which still had a phone call active with the leader of the second Gensou team. He shouted into the phone that they should take the jerk's family hostage. Let them do it right now. Then, he turned to Sang-woo and said that he was a jerk. If he laid a finger on him, his family would die. Get him to give him an antidote, and quickly. His muscles continued to melt, emitting steam, and a strange voice came on the phone, apologizing and saying that he had dialed the wrong number. The bearded man meanwhile had dealt with the second Gensou team and holding the phone to his ear said that it was the Canis Guild. There was a knock on the door of Sang-woo's parents' apartment, and his father asked who was there at this hour. He opened the door and peered through the crack, asking who was there. There was a bearded man standing in the doorway. He greeted them and said that he was from the Canis Guild. Sun-woo's father was a little surprised and worried to see such an imposing man standing in the doorway. He greeted him, then asked blankly, "The Canis Guild?" The man apologized for the late visit and said that he had come to inform them that their son had successfully completed his mission and was R. While he was saying this, he held the Gensou leader with his right hand, hiding him from Father Sang-woo's eyes. Sang-woo wasn't hurt. The team leader trembled in pain and thought that his head was about to explode. The man replied that of course he was fine. Sun-woo's father invited him in, but he refused, and team leader Gensou thought that as soon as he applied a little more strength, he would die. After that, the man said goodbye to Sang-woo's father, saying that he needed to leave, and he thanked him. The door closed, and the rest of the team members came up to the man, holding their weapons at the ready. He turned his gaze on them and said that they would go with him. Just after he dealt with them on the street, the team leader's phone rang, and he answered it. Chang Xiang asked, "Are they there yet?" Let them cut off his parents' fingers nicely. He didn't finish. His hand dropped limply, and his frightened voice started coming out of the phone. What's wrong with his hand? What the hell? Let them take the jerk's family hostage right now. An antidote. He needs an antidote. After listening to this, the man apologized and said that he had dialed the wrong number. This is the Canis Guild. He tossed the phone aside and asked, "Fingers, what an idiot he is he went somewhere in the parking lot, and he called him, and he said that everything was already settled. In that case, Mr. Young Sang-woo should already know things all is well on the other side too." Meanwhile, Chang Xiang was looking at his phone in surprise, and Sang-woo sat down next to him. Chang Xiang gritted his teeth and shouted in rage that they were useless scum. But suddenly his cry of rage was replaced by a cry of savage pain that tore at him from the inside out. The muscles on his face began to melt, and he began to beg for help. Sang-woo sat next to him and silently watched his suffering and listened to his screams. Chang Xiang's body was already noticeably thinner. His face was hollowed out, and he continued to scream and wheeze in pain. Sun-woo leaned in close to his face and said that if he wanted to live, then from now on, let him spend his energy solely on breathing. Chang Ji-young couldn't even get a word out of his mouth, and Sang-woo held up his emaciated hand and told him to listen carefully. He grabbed his hand with both of his own and looked him in the eye, telling him not to let him lay a finger on the people around him. He started to stretch Chang Xiang's arm out to the sides, causing his body to tremble, and he gritted his teeth, wheezing in pain. Sang-woo said that he should remember. Anyao was watching them from her hiding place, and a second later, Sang-woo broke Chang Xiang's arm and asked if he understood. The only response was a deafening shout from all over the warehouse. As time passed, the clones had already taken Junmo to the hospital and Number 4 was standing by his bed and guarding him. Suddenly, there were some sounds coming from the window and Sangwoo called out to Junmo. Junmo shifted his gaze towards the window, and when he saw him climbing over the window frame, he exclaimed, "Why did he go through the window?" And when he saw him climbing over the window frame, he exclaimed, "Why did he go through the window? They're on the 5th floor." Sangwoo replied that he was told that the time for visiting had passed. How does he feel? He replied that fortunately, there were healers here. They said he would only have to stay in a cast for a few weeks. Anyway, is he hurt? Sunwoo used his finger to wipe the blood from his cheek and replied that it was fine. He was already healed. He didn't have to worry about the Silver Moon Guild anymore. They wouldn't dare disturb him again. Junmo was silent for a few seconds as he considered his words, then looked down and said that he understood. After thinking for a while, Sangwoo called out to him, then pulled a chair over to his bunk and sat down. He asked if he should go through a reassessment of his rank. Junmo asked in surprise. Its rank increased, and it was deemed suitable for a rescue mission, but it wasn't tested. Sunwoo said that he only wanted to raise his stats to earn money to pay for his hospital bills, and he wasn't interested in strength and power. Sunmo asked if there was a reason why he suddenly changed his mind. Sunwoo covered his face and replied that he thought he only needed to do his job well, and he didn't care if people looked down on him because of his low rank, but this incident made him rethink his views. He clenched his hand into a fist and said that if he was in a class or stronger hunter, then the Silver Moon Guild wouldn't have done so. They wouldn't even think about attacking him or the JM agency. He raised his serious gaze to Junmo and said that was why he wanted to ask. Junmo interrupted him and said that if he actually raised his rank, it would benefit the agency and they would be extremely grateful. However, only having high-ranked hunters would make their position stable, and even for him, as a hunter, it would be the best way to prove his abilities. After listening to him, Sangwoo said that in that case, he thought he would have to do it. Junmo cut him off in mid-sentence and said that this way, he would attract more people's attention. Therefore, such incidents will not stop happening. Sangwoo became nervous and Junmo said that this way, he would attract more people's attention. Therefore, such incidents will not stop happening. S.A. Sangwoo closed his eyes as he thought about it and then replied that he had already decided. After a while, he came to the Hunters Association and was finally called. Sangwoo walked over to the association employee and sat down across from him, and he started typing something into the computer and asked, "Did he come for a rank reassessment?" Sangwoo confirmed his words and the man started typing in his details. He is young Sangwoo's hunter, currently has E rank and cloning skill. Is he alone? Usually, the test is conducted as a group. Sangwoo thought that he knew he would ask. He thought back to the conversation he had with Junmo earlier. He said that people usually test whether they can defeat a monster of their own rank by staying in a group. If it's a C-class monster, the C-class hunter forms a group to destroy it. Sunwoo said that it turns out that the monster is usually stronger than the hunter. Junmo replied that in one-on-one battles, this is the case. He smiled and said it didn't apply to him. Remembering this, Sangwoo replied to the employee that he was going to do it alone. The man sighed and said that in that case, he needed to deal with a monster ranked higher than him and gather evidence. He can send a message to the security team to confirm. Sangwoo raised his hand and asked uncertainly, can he skip the D, C, and B rank test right away? The man asked in surprise, what did he say? He wondered what was wrong with him. Is he trying to confuse it? He even said that he would go himself. He apologized and said that he could only apply for one rank higher than the current one, so he wouldn't be able to skip. Sangwoo scratched his head awkwardly and asked, is that so? He understood. In that case, what kind of monster should he kill for D rank? The man sighed in exasperation and handed him the documents, saying that it would be a fish man. He thought that he wouldn't be able to do anything with some dumb cloning skill. Sunwoo took the document, and the association employee said that this monster has good defense and high strength, so bullets won't work. Sangwoo thanked him and asked, that's all it takes, right? These words for some reason infuriated the man, and he, barely restraining himself, confirmed his words and irritably wished him good luck. Sangwoo ignored his irritated behavior and went to the waiting area. He looked at the document and thought that that fisherman was also a D rank. The man, meanwhile, looked at Sangwoo's retreating back and thought that he would see what he could do. He is sure that he will come back and ask you to withdraw your application. Sangwoo sat down on a chair and bought himself a coffee. After a while, He started searching through his phone, then looked down at the document again, bored. 2 hours later, Sangwoo was still drinking coffee and sitting on the chair. The man who had been watching him all this time slammed his fists on the table in exasperation and thought, why isn't he hunting? Suddenly, he saw Sangwoo getting up from the chair and thought, is he finally leaving? But contrary to his expectations, Sangwoo calmly walked up to him, and he thought, why did he come back? Contrary to his expectations, Sangwoo calmly walked up to him, and he thought, why did he come back? He asked if he would like to withdraw the application. But Sangwoo interrupted him and said that he had passed. The man asked in surprise, what? Sangwoo replied that he had killed the fish man. He had proof. Have him register him as a D-rank hunter. The man thought, what kind of nonsense is this brat talking about? He also sat stupidly on the spot for these 2 hours. But the man didn't know that during those 2 hours, Sunwoo's clone was out hunting. The man looked at him suspiciously and wondered what he was saying after drinking coffee. He apologized and said that he didn't even see him go hunting. Sunwoo frowned slightly and asked if he could check it out first. He's sure the team from the hunting area has already sent a confirmation email. The man agreed and looked down at the computer monitor, wondering what he was doing. He opened the record of visiting and passing the hunt and saw that Sangwoo had killed 5 monsters, and it was confirmed. He was very surprised when he saw the notes and then looked up at Sangwoo. He asked if everything was all right now. The man asked him to wait and dialed the number of the security post. The guard picked up the phone and said that this was a guard dialed the number of the security post. How can it help? The man said it was a reassessment center. Is he sure that hunter young Sangwoo caught 5 fish men? The guard said he'd take a look. He looked at the records and said that he compared. Hearing this, the man completely stopped understanding what was going on, and the thought occurred to him, is this system really broken? The security guard said that he didn't understand why both the head of the team and the participant were called the same. The man ignored this and put away his phone in shock, thinking, did he pay a bribe to the security post? But how? He hadn't even left this place. Sunwoo asked, did he get confirmation? Sunwoo's voice snapped the man out of his thoughts, and he confirmed his words in surprise and asked for forgiveness. He will raise his rank immediately. He thought that this was some kind of nonsense. It was simply impossible. He's sure he pulled off some dirty trick. He said with a smirk that everything is ready. He congratulates him on being promoted to D rank. He thought that he would report him right after, so let him enjoy his well-off D rank life for now. Sangwoo thanked him and said there was something else. He would like to register as a C rank. These words completely shocked the man. He looked at Sangwoo in shock and asked, what? After a while, an N wandered down the street at night. She went to the wall that had a hole in it and pulled out a bag of crystals. She felt it, making sure the crystals were still there, and then her gaze turned slightly sad. She recalled how after the battle with Chongzin, she apologized to Sangwoo, and he asked her what she was apologizing for. She looked down and nervously said that she thought it was because of her that the Jam Agency was attacked. She stole their precious crystals from the hunting grounds. She didn't know this was going to happen, and she's really sorry. Sunwoo was slightly surprised and said that he now understood why they were demanding that they return some crystals. As he moved closer to her, she shivered with shame and fear and wondered why she had done this, even after she'd seen what he'd done to those people. Sangwoo said it wasn't her fault. Hearing this, Young was surprised, and Sangwoo said that they thought he was the thief, so they tried to harm his agency and family. This only concerns him and the Silver Moon Guild, so don't let her worry. He averted his gaze and said that the reason for the misunderstanding wasn't because of the crystals that he stole from them, but he's sure she did it for a reason. He doesn't know what the Silver Moon Guild and Hee-sung did to her, so he won't think her problems are trivial. She doesn't need to apologize. Realizing that he didn't blame her, An pursed her lips and pulled the cap down over her face. Remembering this, she slung the bag of crystals over her shoulder and walked on, saying that this problem was only between her and the guild. With that, she stepped up and continued running down the road. As time passed, the hunters that were in the association looked in surprise in the direction of Sunwoo. One of them asked his friend, "Did he see this?" The guy said, "Let him film this madness." An excited employee of the association congratulated Sangwoo on being ranked C and B, and after that Sangwoo got up from his chair and thanked him. He went to the exit and said that he thought it was enough for today. Cold sweat began to run down the man's face, and he thought for today. The employee, who was sitting next to him, was surprised and said that he finally did today. Cold sweat began to run down the man's face, and he thought, for today. The employee, who was sitting next to him, was surprised and said that he finally did it. The man looked at him and asked in surprise, "Does he know him?" The employee replied that of course he knew him. He requested a duplicate entrance to the hunting area. The doctor was particularly vocal about it, sputtering and claiming that he had never seen such a skill before. But in fact, he was surprised that there hadn't been a huge uproar yet. Was it really a matter of low rank? The man asked in surprise, duplicating the entrance. An employee of the association said that in just one day, he had risen from E rank to B rank. So the network of hunters will definitely go off the rails. He should have asked for his autograph. An employee of the association said that in just one day, he had risen from E rank to B rank. So the network of hunters will definitely go off the rails. He should have asked for his autograph. Sun Woo, meanwhile, walked past the surprised hunters and left the building. And a week passed after that. A lot has changed since then. The headlines in the newspapers began to include his name and information that he had quickly risen in rank. One article reported that the Hunters Association commented on the sharp increase in Hunter Young Sang-woo's strength. The association responded that Hunter Young Sang-woo's growth rate and achievements exceeded all their expectations, and they recognized his passion and potential. People reacted to this in different ways. Some were surprised by this rate of growth, while others recognized its potential and reacted positively. There were also those who began to worry, noting the too rapid speed of its development. So they offered to take it under observation and control. There was also news in the newspapers about the return of the Canis Guildaso team. Park Won-tae commented on it like this: "They are happy to have Thai. Young Sang-woo, a newcomer to the hunter world, had been hiding in shadows for a long time. But now he had surpassed any wild expectations, professional skills at the core. This rate of growth has attracted everyone's attention to his personality, and his name is increasingly appearing in conversati." The reporter greeted the Jam representative and said that today he was going to find out some facts about the rookie hunter. Young Sang-woo, "It's a pleasure to meet him." The agent replied that it was mutual, and said that today he was going to find out some facts about the rookie hunter, Young Sang-woo. There were comments on the internet that he was an accursed agency. He's sure that will change now. They took him in when he was rank F. Someone left a comment saying that the Hisong Guild would definitely not leave them alone. Another user wrote that he immediately received a B rank. He couldn't, Sun Woo's account balance also increased rapidly. He received a transfer from the Canis Guild of 5 billion won. Sun Woo was surprised to see such an amount in his account and thought, how many zeros are there? He started counting, and then the whole hospital heard his surprised cry. He exclaimed, 5 billion. After that, he called Park Won-tae, and he replied with a smile that it was just a payment for a successfully completed task. Sang-woo excitedly said that it was too much. Won-tae replied that even Thothi only agreed in words. Saving their team was still difficult. It seems that Kong Joon-mo's agent didn't tell him about it. Sang-woo replied that he had talked about the contract, but he didn't think he would get that much. Won-tae said he didn't need to worry, just let him accept the money. No one else would have taken the job, and let him visit them sometime. Sang-woo excitedly replied that in that case, he would definitely visit them. Removed the phone from his face, and then sat down on his knees and clenched his hands into fists, almost crying with joy. He thought, what just happened? Now he doesn't have to worry about hospital bills. He looked through the glass at his sister, who was lying on the hospital bed, and thought that even though this money was enough for long-term mana infusion therapy, this amount was enough to get it. He needs the blessing of his class healer. He gave his sister a determined look and mentally told her to wait a little longer. He'll find it, and he'll be on his knees begging. Meanwhile, the head of the Silver Moon Guild, Yang Jukul, was very angry and swore at Kong Chengshang. He shouted that he thought he would be useful since he was sent by the Hisong Guild itself. What's the point of Yellow Guild crystals now? No one wants to work with them. He took out the files of important documents and lit a fire in his hand, saying that if the Canis Guild was involved, it was really dangerous. He should at least destroy the documents. Suddenly, someone behind him said his name. Ham Mi-ho looked at him with displeasure and said that she heard that he was the one who robbed their warehouses. Jukul gritted his teeth and said her name in fright. He released the documents and said that there seemed to be some misunderstanding. Can they talk first? He immediately turned to her and was about to strike her with a fiery fist, telling her to die. But as if it had expected this, it quickly lunged forward and wounded him with its sharp claws, causing blood to gush out of his body. She frowned and told him not to open his mouth. She doesn't plan to talk to him. After a while, Junmo arrived at the Canis Guild and entered Wanti's office, saying that he was here. Wanti was glad to see him and asked how his hand was. Junmo sat down across from him and said that the doctor said that he can't move his arm for a while, but it doesn't matter now. He heard that he protected Yang Sangwoo's family. He doesn't even know how to thank him. Wanti said it wasn't worth it. Did he say that the people who ambushed them were from the Silver Moon Guild? Junmo confirmed his words and said that he thought they weren't the only ones behind it. Does he know Hunter Kong Chengshang? Wanti confirmed his words and asked if he was the main suspect in this attack. Right, he is also the vice head of the Silver Moon Guild. He had heard that Sunwoo had made it impossible for him to recover. Junmo replied that it was true, but he's actually one of the hunters he worked with when he was. Wanti was surprised by his words and then asked, does he mean that Kong Chengshang was acting under the cover of the Hisong Guild? Junmo said that everyone knows the close relationship between the Silver Moon Guild and Hisong. Wanti asked, so he assumes that the Hisong Guild is behind the incident, but they need to prove it. During their conversation, they didn't notice Maiho enter. She went up to them and said it was about the precious crystals. The assholes from Silver Moon produced the crystals and gave them to the Hisong Guild, and they weren't the only ones who did. Wanti said that it looked like she was visiting the Silver Moon produced the crystals and gave them to the Hisong Guild. And they weren't the only ones who did. Wanti said that it looked like she was visiting the Silver Moon Guild. She handed him the documents and said that he was right. It was Yangru. Wanti, meanwhile, was looking through the documents and asked, precious crystals, what is it? Maiho replied that it was a physical enhancement medicine. She knew something wasn't right. It was inconceivable that a B-ranked guild like Silver Moon could produce crystals without patronage. The Hisong Guild is involved in this matter, which means it's incredibly dangerous. Time passed. The activity of hunters was legalized only after the end of the cataclysm. The same went for managing hunting territories through soldiers, taxes from hunting, and other things like buying items that fell from monsters. Therefore, the work of the hunter became stable, but not everyone agreed with this. Some hunters were against registering their identity and restrictions on hunting, which forced them to hide and form their own circle. Thus, unlicensed hunters make deaccessing illegal weapons and information to protect their income. An had just arrived at a place where such things were actively hunted. She called out happily to the bartender, and he said his name in frustration. She showed him the bag and said there were crystals in it. She put the bag on the bar counter, and the bartender said he said there was no need. An interrupted him and said that they were indeed at Sin's Olden Station. Can someone take care of them right now? Can someone buy them for a high price? The bartender lowered his head in frustration and asked for her forgiveness. She was surprised and asked him blankly, what does he mean by that? At that moment, masked men came around the corner and asked, is she Kim Yoon-young? Two tall masked men approached her and simultaneously told her that she needed to go with them. She was very worried and asked who else are they. One of them grabbed her arm and she called out to the bartender, who looked down in frustration and said he was sorry his family. One of the patrons in the bar made a small noise and walked towards them, saying that it was so noisy. He cocked his head and asked the men irritably, who the hell are they? What are they wearing on their faces? Have they completely lost their fear? The masked man told him to move back, but he didn't listen and said that he didn't know who they were, but if they buried them here, no one would even know. Even as he spoke, a fist flew into his face. The man was immediately thrown to the side from such a blow and Sangwoo slapped him across the face, breaking his mask. He looked at Yunnan and asked, does she see this? He told you so. The night they killed Chong Seong, he told her that he wouldn't think her problems were trivial. She doesn't need to apologize. Now she belongs to the JM agency, so he will help her. Yunnan was surprised and asked how. Sangwoo said that she should try to sell the crystals that she got. Right now, Sangwoo was standing next to the man on the floor and said that he said they would take the bait. The masked man's partner asked who he was. At the same time, the head of the Hisung Guild, Shin Hisung, was in an unknown location. The security guard at the entrance said that he would give you 10 minutes, no more. Hisung agreed, and the security guard said that he couldn't use voice recording. Hisung said he knew that too, and the guard said he shouldn't ask anything that didn't concern him. Hisung lazily agreed, and the guard said that he would check on him now. Hisung spread his hands to the side with a grin, and the man started groping him, and he asked, does he think it's funny? It checks in a rank hunter. Does he think he'll bring a gun with him? The guard finished and said he didn't have any. Hee-sung suddenly asked if he wanted him to throw a boulder. The guard looked up at him, but Hee-sung immediately laughed and said he was joking. If he wanted to, the person behind the door would have already escaped. The guard said that he was opening the door, then the door opened and he said that he could go inside. The oracle is waiting for him. Hee-sung walked into a large room with wires and power blocks everywhere. There was a raised platform against the wall where the oracle sat, with wires connected to her chair, and a ladder leading up to the platform itself. The woman who sat on such a throne was a fortune teller, an oracle. She looked at her guest and said that he had come again. Hee-sung smiled and said that it sounded like she wasn't expecting it. Does she like to joke? She replied that of course she knew why he was here, but her answer remained the same. He needs to give up. She hopes he will be satisfied with his current life. Hee-sung said that she was the one who said that every powerful person, including politicians, would bow their heads to him. That's what she told him. He raised his voice and said that everything was going according to plan up to this point. Now what? Does he need to give up? She calmly replied that, to be more precise, it changed because of someone else. Hee-sung started shouting and asked who the hell was he talking about. The oracle replied that she did not know. It's not about one person or two. At this time, Sang-woo had already dealt with the second masked man. He showed him the phone and asked if it was his phone, right? Let him tell you the password. The man said he'd better kill him. These words surprised Sang-woo and he asked why such cruelty. He can't do that. He looked at the bar's customers, who were very unhappy with the noise, and said that if he didn't make a deal, he would pass it on to those people. He smiled and said that they seemed very angry. They even said that no one would find his body. He wonders if they will allow him to survive a quick and painless death. Hearing this, the man gritted his teeth and then said the password. Meanwhile, a man was sitting at a table in an unknown place and the phone rang. His name is Shin Jin-uk, and he is the leader of the first team of the Hee-sung Guild. He answered the phone and asked what was it. There was a strange voice on the phone that said they had received the crystals. Janek said it was fine. Let them head to factory number 3. By the way, what happened to his voice? He said they were in the basement. Janek said goodbye to him and told him to change his phone. He also can't let the production of precious crystals fail, and their CEO is very angry about what happened to Silver Moon. Sang-woo, who had purposely interfered with the voice, agreed and said that they were already leaving. Un was standing nearby, looking at him in shock. After the conversation ended, Sang-woo thanked the man and said that they would give him the crystals. So let him take them there, but in return, he needs to tell them where the factory is located. The man didn't agree and said they would kill him if he told them. Hearing this, Sang-woo turned to the, let him leave it here, then they can handle it themselves. The masked man called Sang-woo a nasty yerk and said it wasn't what he promised. Sang-woo stood up and asked, what do you mean? He said he wouldn't kill him. He sighed wearily and said that he was too soft-hearted to watch the cruelty, so he'll go home. The masked man gritted his teeth and looked up. Sang-woo smiled as he got the desired result, and then the man told him everything. After a while, Sang-woo and Un-young walked out of the restaurant, and he asked, did she write everything down? Have it send this to the agent along with the location of the factory? She nodded and said she understood. After that, she lowered her gaze in embarrassment and thanked him. She is very grateful for the help. Sun-woo smiled and said it was nothing. Un-young hurried to change the subject and said that she had heard that his skill was cloning. Is it true? She'd seen it on the news. Now she understood why the guys around him looked so much like him. He asked her if she didn't know, so she wasn't that interested in others. Anon looked up at him and asked, what about him? Does he even know her name? He said she was a potion maker. She immediately grabbed him by the throat, and he asked for forgiveness, and she told him to correct himself and told him her name. Sang-woo said that they didn't even introduce themselves. She let go of his throat and asked irritably, what is he doing here alone? Where are his clones? He thought for a moment, then smiled and giggled, saying they were busy. His clones, meanwhile, were roasting the meat and enjoying the delicious smell and taste. The waiter cut them some grilled meat, then pointed to the table and told them what they could eat. The clones who had been waiting all this time were a little overjoyed. Number 1 picked up a piece of beef with his chopsticks, which was dripping with delicious juice, and then popped it into his mouth and chewed it with a big smile. Images of the little calf that had just been born immediately popped into his mind. Then this calf grew up and grazed in a green meadow among its relatives. But then the time of death came, and this poor cow was sent to the vat. It was as delicious as ramen. At this time, Sunwoo, and Young, sent a recording of the conversation to their agent. The three of them in the office listened to it, and Junmo said in shock that he recognized the voice. This is the leader of the first team of the Hisong Guild, Shin Jinik. This is Shin Haisong's son. Wani said that in this case, the connection between Hisong Guild, Shin Jinuk. Wani said that in this case, the connection between Hisong and the crystals is obvious. Maiho said that so there are a total of 5 sources that supply the Hisong Guild's crystals. Among them is the Silver Moon Guild. The rest are like a silver moon. All of them are at least B-class guilds. Junmo asked, can't they deal with the Haisung Guild with this evidence? He had heard that making crystals was illegal. Maiho said they would like to, but Wanti continued for her, saying that unfortunately, it is difficult. The Haisung Guild doesn't produce crystals on its own, and they are also protected by the Korea Hunter Association. Even if they send them to jail, they will be released immediately. All he can say about this case is that they should proceed cautiously and slowly. He turned to Junmo and said that he shouldn't go alone. They'll put a guard on him immediately. Junmo agreed and said that he would tell the hunter young Sangwoo to be careful too. Wanti remained silent, thinking about something. After that, he said that he didn't have to worry about him. No one would be able to kidnap him. After that, Junmo sent him a message saying that they had listened to the recording. This person belongs to the Hisan Guild. They also found out that the crystals are the starting material for the production of a banned substance called precious crystals. Sunwoo asked, precious crystals? It sounds dangerous. Annan turned her head to look at him, and he told her not to go outside just yet, but to stay in the office. Annan asked, have they already cleared up the mess that the Silver Moon Guild made there? Sunwoo asked, she hasn't been to the new office yet, has she? She repeated, new office. He took her along and told her that she would be surprised. As time passed, they arrived at the new office and were greeted by Junmo. He was happy to see Annan and said that she was here too, which was great. He's just arrived himself. Annan looked around and saw a large table with mugs and a coffee machine. A little to the side was a work area with several computers. She said, do they use the whole floor? Junmo said that in fact, he had been planning to move for a long time. He had visited a lot of places, and since their old office was destroyed, he decided to just speed up a little. Sangwoo laughed and asked, they'll soon be the #1 agency in the country, right? Then this place won't even be enough. Junmo also laughed and agreed with him, saying that they also have a hunter named Young Sangwoo, who easily defeated a B-class hunter. Sangwoo stopped at the door and looked at Anyao with a smile, saying that there was also a special room for her. He opened the door, and they looked inside. Inside was all the necessary equipment, all sorts of potion bottles, vials, and ingredients. Annan was very surprised to see this, and Sangwoo said that it has the most advanced potion-making equipment. Mr. Agent did his best. Annan went inside and started looking at the shelves in surprise. Junmo went up to her and told her that most of the items were already purchased, but if she needed anything, just let her tell him. He came even closer to her and whispered in her ear that she could also sleep and eat in the next room. Annan was even more surprised and excited by these words. She shyly pulled the cap down over her face and thanked him, thinking that meant he already knew she had nowhere to go. Suddenly, the agent's phone rang. He immediately answered the phone, and judging by his excited and surprised face, he had received important news. Right after the call, he called out to Sangwoo and he asked, what is it? Junmo excitedly said that he thought he needed to go to the hospital right away. As time passed, Shin Hee-sung arrived at the Silver Moon Guild warehouse. He went into the most ruined room and stopped at a pool of blood. He just stood there in silence for a few seconds, then said let him come out. In front of his feet, a dark blob appeared from the shadows on the ground and quickly grew in size. A masked man emerged from the clot and said that he was here. Hee-sung asked where Yang Jukul was. The man replied that he was locked in the walls of the Yellow Guild. Apparently, all the documents regarding the precious crystals were confiscated. Hee-sung asked, crystals too? The man handed him a blooded mask and told him that judging from the conversation with the other team members, they already knew the location of the factory. Hearing this news, Hee-sung gritted his teeth in rage. After that, he took out 2 vials from his inner pocket and gave them to the man, asking if he knew who he was supposed to use it on. Right? The man replied that he understood everything. After that, he turned back into a lump of shadow and began to disappear. And Hee-sung said that since they wanted the precious crystals so badly, they would give them to them. even though they are still imperfect. Meanwhile, in the basement of the Yellow Guild, young Jukul was trying to free himself from the chains. He cursed a few times in anger, then suddenly fell silent when he saw the shadows gathering on the ground. A man appeared in front of him, and he asked in surprise, "Why is he here?" I asked him to calm down, and said that the executive director sent him here. Jukul asked, "Shin Hisum?" The man said nothing, but stuck the needle of the syringe into the ampule and began to fill the contents. After he finished, Jukul asked worriedly, "What is he doing?" The man started walking towards Hyman. Jukul became even more nervous, shouting, "What is he doing?" The masked man said that he didn't need to worry about anything. It won't hurt him. Jukul became even more nervous, shouting, "What is he doing?" The masked man said that he didn't need to worry about anything. It won't hurt him. Jukul tried to move back. Watching as the syringe neared his throat, he started crying and shouted for him to stop. At that time, Maiho and Wanti came out of the building, and she said that he shouldn't have seen her off. He replied that he had already said that he wanted to get information from young Jukul. She smiled and asked if he was sure it wasn't because she might be kidnapped. In response, he said that then he should have been worried about the kidnapper. Maiho suddenly stopped and twitched her nose, sniffing. She said she could smell burning. Ahead of her, she saw a burning building, and in the midst of the flames, people were lying and a huge monster was standing. Maiho immediately rushed forward because her guild building was on fire, and Wanti got nervous and took out his sword. The two of them ran closer, despite the huge monster with glittering eyes standing at the entrance. Maiho crouched down next to the injured member of her guild and asked, "Is he still alive? What happened here?" Want ran up behind her, his sword ready, his eyes fixed on the monster. The guy replied that there was a monster in the basement. Their B-class hunters couldn't stop him. Maiho gritted her teeth and looked up at the monster, thinking, so it's at least a class, but that's impossible. There aren't any portals nearby, so where did it come from? When the monster turned to face her, she saw a noticeable scar on the bridge of its nose. She thought back to her fight with the Silver Moon Guild head. He had the exact same scar. Her face took on a very surprised look, and then she asked, "Is that young Jukul?" Meanwhile, in the hospital, the phone in the room beeped in time with Chen Xiong's pulse. He lay unconscious on the bed. Suddenly a shadow fell over him. The masked man who appeared in front of him said that he trusted him and sent him to Silver Moon. But this is where it all ended up. He took out another ampule and stuck a syringe in it, telling him not to worry. This will at least allow him to move. He was about to put the syringe to his neck, but suddenly the girl behind him told him to stop, and he did. Sona used her skill, which allowed her to see all the opponents around her, and said that she didn't know what he was up to, but it wasn't going to happen on her shift. The man turned around and, looking at her and disappearing at the same time, said that he understood. A moment later, he appeared behind her and brandished the syringe, saying that then he would use it on her. But suddenly a strange hand caught him, forcing him to stop. It was Sangwoo, who was holding the man's hand and saying that in the hospital, only nurse doctors have the right to give injections. Right after that, they got into a fight. At this time, Wanti noticed movement from the monster's direction and warned Maiho that it was coming. The monster turned in their direction and raised its arm, ready to strike. After that, he immediately swung his hand and smashed the ground with all his strength. Cracks appeared on the ground, and Want jumped sharply to get out of the line of impact. This attack sent a shockwave that cracked the other streets of the city, and caused all the buildings around to shake, causing a rumble. Wanti landed next to Maiho and asked, "Is that young Jucho? Was he in a class hunter?" She was still looking in the direction of the monster in surprise, and said that it was in the upper ranks of the B class. Judging by the scar on her face, she's pretty sure it's him. It looks like he suddenly appeared from the basement. Wanti thought, turning people into monsters. Even amplification, is this really possible? He remembered how Maiho had brought him the precious crystal operation documents and asked what they were. She replied that it was a body-strengthening drug. As he recalled this, he looked at the monster that was standing in the midst of the blazing fire and he said that, if it really was Young Jukul, then he Sung planned to take care of the Silver Moon Guild. It also means that Kong Chengjiang, who is in the hospital, is also in danger. She said that in fact, Sona was at the hospital and saw a suspicious person, so she contacted Mr. Junmo. Suddenly, the monster screamed loudly, raising its head up, and she said that first they need to deal with it. After these words, she raised her hands and a magical blue cloud appeared between them, which she sent forward, sharply stretching out her arms. A bright blue flash shot forward, and as soon as it reached the monster's body, it tore a hole in it. But this hole was immediately overgrown, and right after that, he abruptly approached Manhwa and clenched his hand into a fist to hit her. And she didn't have time to do anything. But one came to the rescue in time, swung his sword, and easily cut off the monster's arm. Feeling the intense and burning pain, the monster screamed loudly, and blood gushed out from the wound. Want meanwhile was preparing for the next attack, his eye flashing blue. And then he swung his sword sharply, using the crescent moon slash technique. The impact sent up dust and sparks, but when the dust settled, they saw that the monster had the shape of a severed limb that it was able to defend itself with. While they were looking at him, he decided to attack and swung his hand sharply, but they reacted in time and defended against the blow. After which they were thrown back. They braked and Wanty said it was definitely Jujo. Manhwa agreed with him and said that he even used the skill. The monster suddenly screamed loudly, clenching its hand into a fist, but did not notice that something was falling on it from above, pointing the tip down. A second later, a bright flame ignited from the tip, and the owner of this weapon fell on the monster and plunged the blade directly into its head. The monster's dead body fell to the ground, and the man on top asked in surprise, where did the monster come from in the middle of the city? It was the head of the Tia Guild, Kim Il-gon. Manhwa was glad to see him, and Wanty sheathed his sword and came closer, asking if he was nearby. Il-gon looked in their direction and said their names in surprise, and then asked what happened here. He needs an explanation. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a fight broke out between Sangwoo and the masked man. The man blocked Sunwoo's fist that was a Budo hit him and said it was amazing. How did he know he was here? Sungwoo was nervous, looking him straight in the eye, and Sona went on the attack and exclaimed that someone had snuck into the hospital and he thought it would go unnoticed. As she approached, she activated the flame skill, igniting a fireball in her palm. After that, she extended her hands forward, intending to direct the flames at the masked man. But he suddenly waved his hand and her flames immediately dissipated. She wondered if he'd cancelled. The man said that this is not possible. Is it a flame? You can't use a flame in a hospital. While he was distracted, Sangwoo threw himself on top of him and swung his leg, saying that he didn't know that he had snuck into the hospital to say something like that. He managed to land a punch that sent the masked man flying backwards, but he didn't let himself fall. He looked at his broken arm, which he was using to protect himself from the blow, and said that he was quite strong. Sangwoo, without taking his eyes off the opponent, walked up to Siona and asked, "Is she okay?" She thanked him and said that he had come quickly. He said he was on his way. It is very convenient that their new office is located nearby. The masked man got to his feet and said that everything was clear to him now. He understood why Chang Xiang had lost. He's really strong. He turned it around, looking outside through the window, and said that it looked like his clones had also arrived. The clones, who had just eaten a delicious meal, had already rushed to the hospital entrance and were standing outside waiting for Sangwoo's instructions while patting their stuffed bellies. Sunwoo asked, "Is he planning on running away?" The man's body started disappearing into the shadows, and he laughed, asking if he was teasing him. He's not an idiot, and he won't stubbornly fight against multiple opponents. They'll see each other soon. Still, there are a lot of shadows around. For example, the intensive care unit for patients with Mana disease right below them. These words made Sunwoo nervous. The masked man wanted to say something about his sister, but Sangwoo immediately swung his sword, cutting off his head. The man's head tilted to the side, and he asked, "Do you understand now? Here's how to make yourself mad." After saying that, he disappeared into the shadows and said that they would see each other again, while Sangwoo stood still and breathed heavily due to anger. After the incident, everything quickly came to a logical conclusion. With the help of 3 guild leaders, Taeyang, Yalo, and Canis, they managed to deal with the monster that appeared in the middle of the city. Kim Il-gon got angry after hearing the whole story and tried to spread the word by saying that Shin Hee-sung was a suspicious person. But to people, this incident was presented as a normal monster breakout from a short-lived portal. And Yang Rui, this incident was presented as a normal monster breakout from a short-lived portal, and Yang Jukul was recorded as missing in action, news of a monster in the middle of the city, and the he. There were articles saying that the Silver Moon Guild leader had disappeared without a trace, and since no clues were found, the guild members decided to disband the guild. The reason that the Silver Moon Guild Master is now listed as missing is because no one has volunteered to explain the true reason for his disappearance. Manhwa was questioned about this incident, and she said that this monster was actually a human, when asked directly if she kept a human in her G. Even though it was late, they still discovered the location of the crystals and headed there. However, once they arrived at the location, it was already empty. All the people associated with crystal production were also missing. Only the equipment remained in place. There were several reports of monsters appearing in the city, but this news was suppressed. The monsters were quickly disposed of, and people completely forgot about what had happened. The bodies of these monsters were sold, and the hunters who killed them gave comments about how they screamed like crazy. Everything remained shrouded in mystery, so ended the incident with unidentified monsters. As time passed, Sangwoo was sitting in the office with Junmo. He told the agent that you can't go on like this, of course, it will reduce the effectiveness of hunting, but safety is above all. Junmo asked, will it reduce the efficiency of hunting, so he's going to use clones. Sunwoo said that they didn't have enough funds to hire security guards. He is going to place them in the following way. One clone will be at his home, 2 clones in the hospital, 1 in the jam agency, and the other 2 will continuously exercise and hunt. Jane Mo asked, can't he summon 7 clones now that his level has increased? Sunwoo was surprised by the question at first, but then he smiled and said that he would need to send one of them somewhere, and the Canis Guild would help him with that. Junmo asked blankly, where does he want to send him? Sunwoo remembered the portal to Odin's Tower and said that he wanted to send it to a place he knew. As time passed, one of the clones went to the tower and stopped at a place where invisible monsters lived. He took out a loudspeaker and then started shouting and calling out to the monsters, saying that he was here. There's a fresh man here, unarmed. Hearing the loud sounds, the monsters immediately began to move, and their footprints began to appear on the snow. The tracks grew larger and larger as the clone continued to scream until it was surrounded on all sides. After that, he took out a mana potion and drank it, blowing himself up along with 100 monsters. After a while, the academy finally opened, as indicated by the white-cut ribbons at the entrance. People gathered at the entrance to the opening ceremony of the Korean branch of the Hunter Academy. Confetti rained down from all sides. Journalists started taking photos, and the Academy's rector Won Hak-soo stood at the entrance and smiled at them. The Hunter Academy was founded with the goal of training low-rank hunters to hunt monsters, as well as providing skills at no charge to increase productivity and obtain items for monsters. Meanwhile, the reporters were recording what he said. The rector shouted that even a person with poor skills or low rank, anyone can come to them. By training with their hunter allies and training with them, they will be able to confidently enter the territory for hunting. He pulled the white cloth off the pedestal behind him and said that the person who performed best at the end of the year would receive this elixir. With a smile, he pointed to a beautiful gold-plated bottle of red elixir. Meanwhile, Sangwoo was inside the agency in a private gym. He was lifting dumbbells weighing 250 kilograms and thought that it was a pity that he could not get dumbbells weighing more than a ton. When he asked Junmo about this, he replied that the floor might collapse due to such a heavy weight. Most likely, for such a weight, he would have to visit a hall reinforced with mana. Sangwoo continued with the exercise, but suddenly he started to move in a strange way, trying to ease the boredom, and thought that he was making no progress. Suddenly, a recording from the Academy's opening ceremony appeared on the TV. The reporter said that Rector Won Hak-soo announced the opening of the Hunter Academy and said that applications for the Korean branch will start on the 12th. In addition, the Academy gives additional points to low-ranked hunters and hunters with a small number of skills, encouraging them to enroll in the Academy. Sangwoo looked up at the TV and asked bored, "Where's the remote? What's wrong with the Mr. Agent? Why did he turn on the news?" The elixir was shown on the TV, and the reporter said that the rector surprised many people by revealing that the winner of the Korean branch would be given an elixir as a P. As a result, all applicants will have a chance to learn this, which is a huge motivation to prove yourself to the fullest. After hearing about the elixir, Sangwoo suddenly became interested. Soon, an advertisement for the academy appeared. The students happily held their hands up and chanted to the music that they were going to the Hunter Academy. After that, they started clapping their hands and saying that they needed to believe in the sacred system, even if they lack skills, even if their skills are weak. All of them will be able to learn in the Hunter Academy. After watching the ad, Sangwoo turned to the agent behind him and asked, "Is that true?" that Hunter Academy students can get an elixir. Young was standing next to him, and Junmo said that he was also surprised. He checked everything. The information is true. They have put up the elixir as the main prize in a competition that will bring together Academy students from all over the world. Sangwoo was surprised and said that he had heard about the Korean branch, so they have branches in different countries. Moreover, an elixir was offered as a prize. How can an ordinary academy? Junmo interrupted him and said that they weren't some ordinary academy. This academy was founded by the Enlightenment Group headed by Jumper. It is one of the largest corporations in the world. Sanwoo asked why one of the largest corporations needed it. Junmo replied that this is where the oddities come in, starting with their quest to narrow the gap between low-rank and high-rank awakened ones. By raising the monster-fighting abilities of ordinary hunters, not just strong ones, they aim to reduce the number of accidents during disasters. As for the preferred data for admission, the lower the rank and the poorer the hunter's skills, the better for admission. Sangwoo was a little upset and said that he thought he heard about something like this on the news, but he's currently B-ranked. If he had known this would happen, he would have raised the rank later. Genmo said that of course his rank is too high right now, but he can pass by other criteria. Isn't he bragging about countless useless skills? Anyang burst out laughing, and Sangwoo froze in shock. After that, he asked excitedly, "What does he mean by that? He has more than 10 of them." Anyang continued to hold back her laughter, and Junlo said that heavy attack, marksmanship, and magic bullet are all F-ranked. They are basic. E-rank hunters usually have about 20 skills. Upon reaching the B rank, he needs to have an average of 70 skills. He patted the frustrated Sangwoo's shoulder reassuringly, and said with a smile that in this way, the current number of lousy skills gave him a huge advantage for admission. Hearing this, Sunwoo became quite offended and said that he should stop. That's enough. But Junmo continued, saying that due to his foreign background, he may be subject to the donation-based admission system. Sangwoo looked up at him blankly and repeated, "A donation-based admission system?" Junmo asked. After a while, Sunwoo had already entered the Korean branch of the Hunter Academy. Students were already walking around the academy, and the rector, seeing a new student, greeted him. He smiled and told Sunwoo that it was an honor to meet such an outstanding young man. Sunwoo asked, "What do you mean, outstanding? And anyway, he's the one who should thank him for being accepted here." The rector laughed and clapped his hands, saying that he was so humble. How can he be so humble after spending $250,000 to benefit their academy students? Sangwoo replied with a smile that he was happy as long as he could some. He looked away and thought that it was possible to enter the academy with money. What a strange system. This became real only because, although the academy has a similar system to other educational institutions, it is not considered a state university. The principal started to talk enthusiastically. But Sangwoo didn't listen and thought that thanks to Mr. Agent's negotiation skills, they had agreed on the sum of $250 million. But whether it was $5 or even $10 billion, if this amount allowed one to get their hands on the elixir, anyone would pay. In addition, with their policy of accepting low-ranked awakened ones, the students here are mostly F-ranked and D-ranked is the highest. The students who were passing by started looking back at Sangwoo and whispering, "Isn't that young Sangwoo, the one with the cloning skill?" Sangwoo ignored them and thought that no one here was his match. Even if he studied at a relaxed pace for the entire year, he would still be able to participate in the competition. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by the rector's words that their academy was indeed blessed. In the first year, two representatives of the B rank entered here at once. Sangwoo suddenly froze on the spot and turned a surprised look at the principal, asking, "What did he just say? The recto? This hunter came here the same way he did. He can't tell him who it is, but it's also known." After saying that, he laughed, and Sangwoo wondered what that meant. There was a rival after all. Soon classes began. Students gathered in a large auditorium, and the professor said that he was pleased to meet them. His name is Kong Hisik, and he will teach them basic element magic. They'll probably. The students agreed, and he said that so he would just go through the schedule and they would choose a course for the next week. Sunwoo, meanwhile, was very upset. He covered his face with his hand and thought that he was so happy about the lack of competitors, but it turns out that someone gathered just like him. But who is it? There's no reason for high-ranked hunters to come here, much less a B-ranked hunter. He decided to push those thoughts aside and shrugged, thinking that he didn't care, not that he was interested in the hunter industry no matter what anyone says, as long as they can take first place they. The professor bade them goodbye and waved his hand, saying that they would be done for the day. They'll see each other next week. One of the students came down and took the professor's place. After that, she waved her hand to attract attention and loudly said that there would be a welcome party for everyone that evening. Tell them to meet at the Gorian bar at the intersection in front of the academy at 8 o'clock in the evening. Sang-woo stood up from his seat and thought, welcome party. It's time to start calling this academy a university. He'd rather not go. All of a sudden, he was getting older. And the thought flashed through his mind, isn't there going to be another B rank at this party? He looked at the girl who invited everyone to the party and wondered if he should take a low. It was dark outside, meeting time, and all the students were gathered in the bar. They clinked glasses together, and the clink reverberated through the room. After drinking alcohol, the girls surrounded Sang-woo and started pestering him with questions. Someone asked, is this true? Did he save people in a disaster with a baseball bat? He confirmed her words. Then another girl said that she had heard that he had killed a B-rank monster there, Sunwoo Repli. He was completely smashed up back then. Another girl asked, was he the one who destroyed the Silver Moon Guild? Sunwoo decided not to answer this question, and after that, one of the girls asked him to show her cloning technique. He said they were out hunting, so it wouldn't work. One of the guys at the party looked at him irritably and thought that he was really popular. Suddenly, Sang-woo raised his hand and asked the girls to calm down for a while. He asked if there was another B-rank hunter entering the academy besides him. The girls were suddenly surprised by this question and then looked at each other and repeated, another B-rank. One of the girls said she didn't know. Did such a hunter ever enter the academy? Hearing the answer, Sang-woo thought that they didn't seem to know either. With an awkward smile, he asked them not to think about it. Let them forget what he said. He took out his phone and thought that all the articles on the internet were just about him. Is he hiding himself? It doesn't look like. He stood up and awkwardly scratched the back of his head, telling the girls that it was fun today, but he had to go now. One of them was upset and asked if he was leaving already. They have so much booze left. Another girl said that besides, he didn't even finish his drink. After saying that, Sang-woo picked up his glass and downed the entire contents in one gulp. The girls stared at him in surprise as he gulped down his drink. After saying that, Sang-woo picked up his glass and downed the entire contents in one gulp. The girls stared at him in surprise as he gulped too. He said goodbye and wished them all the best, and they just sat there in shock. He walked out of the bar, closed the door behind him, and as he looked back, he put on his jacket and thought that maybe the antidote was keeping the alcohol out of his system. As he straightened his jacket, he thought about something. He remembered drinking with his friends and having fun. He decided not to dwell on the memories and put his hands behind his back as he headed down the street and thought that he would just go home. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. The girl saw Sang-woo and walked up to him, then pointed her finger. Sang-woo looked at the girl, who was hiding her face under the cap and hood, and confirmed her words, saying that the party wasn't over yet, so let her come in. She covered her mouth in surprise and asked, what about him? Why is he already leaving? He sighed wearily and replied that he didn't know anyone there, so he decided to just go home. Suddenly he was surprised and her voice sounded familiar. Without giving him time to think, the girl began to take off. As soon as she took off her cap and hood, her hair fell down and Sang-woo looked at her in fascination. In front of him was Hae Young teacher with a smile and asked if he knew her, right?